Chapter 1. Ancient Medicine. All who, on attempting to speak or to write on medicine, have assumed for themselves a postulate as a basis for their discussion heat, cold, moisture, dryness, or anything else, that they may fancy who narrow down the causal principle of diseases and of death among men, and make it the same in all cases, postulating one thing or two. All these obviously blunder in many points even of their statements. But they are most open to censure because they blunder in what is an art, and one which all men use on the most important occasions, and give the greatest honors to the good craftsmen and practitioners in it. Some practitioners are poor, others very excellent. This would not be the case if an art of medicine did not exist at all, and had not been the subject of any research and discovery, but all would be equally inexperienced and unlearned therein. And the treatment of the sick would be in all respects haphazard. But it is not so. Just as in all other arts the workers vary much in skill and in knowledge, so also is it in the case of medicine. Wherefore I have deemed that it has no need of an empty postulate, as do insoluble mysteries, about which any exponent must use a postulate, for example, things in the sky or below the earth. If a man were to learn and declare the state of these, neither to the speaker himself nor to his audience would it be clear whether his statements were true or not. For there is no test, the application of which would give certainty. But medicine has long had all its means to hand, and has discovered both a principle and a method, through which the discoveries made during a long period are many and excellent. While full discovery will be made, if the inquirer be competent, conduct his researches with knowledge of the discoveries already made, and make them his starting point. But anyone who, casting aside and rejecting all these means, attempts to conduct research in any other way or after another fashion, and asserts that he has found out anything, is and has been the victim of deception. His assertion is impossible. The causes of its impossibility I will endeavor to expound by a statement and exposition of what the art is. In this way it will be manifest that by any other means discoveries are impossible. But it is particularly necessary, in my opinion, for one who discusses this art to discuss things familiar to ordinary folk. For the subject of inquiry and discussion is simply and solely the sufferings of these same ordinary folk when they are sick or in pain. Now to learn by themselves how their own sufferings come about and cease, and the reasons why they get worse or better, is not an easy task for ordinary folk. But when these things have been discovered and are set forth by another, it is simple. For merely an effort of memory is required of each man when he listens to a statement of his experience. But if you miss being understood by laymen and fail to put your hearers in his condition, you will miss reality. Therefore, for this reason also medicine has no need of any postulate. One, for the art of medicine would never have been discovered to begin with, nor would any medical research have been conducted, for there would have been no need for medicine if sick men had profited by the same mode of living and regimen as the food, drink, and mode of living of men in health, and if there had been no other things for the sick better than these. But the fact is that sheer necessity has caused men to seek and to find medicine, because sick men did not, and do not, profit by the same regimen as do men in health. To trace the matter yet further back, I hold that not even the mode of living and nourishment enjoyed at the present time by men in health would have been discovered, had a man been satisfied with the same food and drink as satisfy an ox, a horse, and every animal save man, for example, the products of the earth, fruits, wood, and grass. For on these they are nourished, grow, and live without pain, having no need at all of any other kind of living. Yet I am of opinion that to begin with man also uses this sort of nourishment. Our present ways of living have, I think, been discovered and elaborated during a long period of time. For many and terrible were the sufferings of men from strong and brutish living, when they partook of crude foods, uncompounded, and possessing great powers, the same in fact as men would suffer at the present day, falling into violent pains and diseases quickly followed by death. Formerly, indeed, they probably suffered less, because they were used to it, but they suffered severely even then. The majority naturally perished, having too weak a constitution, while the stronger resisted longer, just as at the present time some men easily deal with strong foods, while others do so only with many severe pains. For this reason the ancients too seem to me to have sought for nourishment that harmonized with their constitution, and to have discovered that which we use now. So from wheat, after steeping it, winnowing, grinding, and sifting, kneading, baking, they produced bread, and from barley they produced cake. Experimenting with food, they boiled or baked after mixing many other things, combining the strong and uncompounded with the weaker components so as to adapt all to the constitution and power of man, thinking that from foods which, being too strong, the human constitution cannot assimilate when eaten, will come pain, disease, and death, while from such as can be assimilated will come nourishment, growth, and health. To this discovery and research what juster or more appropriate name could be given than medicine, seeing that it has been covered with a view to the health, saving and nourishment of man in the place of that mode of living from which came the pain, disease, and death. That it is not commonly considered an art is not unnatural, for it is inappropriate to call anyone an artist in a CRF in which none are laymen, but all possess knowledge through being compelled to use it. Nevertheless, the discovery was a great one, implying much investigation and art. At any rate, even at the present day, those who study gymnastics and athletic exercises are constantly making some fresh discovery by investigating on the same method what food and what ani are best assimilated and make a man grow stronger. Let us deny whether the acknowledged art of medicine that was discovered for the treatment of the sick and has both a name and artist has the same object as the other art and what its origin was. In my opinion, as I said at the beginning, nobody would have even sought for if the same ways of life had suited Yule the sick and those in health. At any rate, even at the present day, such as do not use medical science, foreigners and some Greeks, live as do those in wealth just as they please, and would neither forgo nor restrict the satisfaction of any of their desires. But those who sought for and discovered medicine, having the same intention as the men I discussed elite in the first place, I think, lessened the bulk of the fancies, and without altering their character greatly diminished their quantity. But they undo that this treatment was sufficient only occasionally, and although clearly beneficial with some patients, it was not so in all cases, as some were in such a condition that they could not assimilate even small quantities of food. As such patients were thought to need weaker nutriment, slops were invented by mixing with much water small quantities of strong foods, and by taking away from their strength by compounding and boiling. Those that were not able to assimilate them were refused even these slops, and were reduced to taking liquids, these moreover being so regulated in composition and quantity as to be moderate, and nothing was administered that was either more or less compounded than it ought to be. VLT must be clearly understood that some are not benefited in disease by slops, but when they take them, their fever and pain grow manifestly worse. And it is plain that what is taken proves nourishment and increase to the disease, but wears away and enfeebles the body. Any men who in this condition take dry food, barley cake, or bread, even though it be very little, will be hurt 10 times more, and more obviously than if they take slops, simply and solely because the food is too strong for their condition, and a man to whom slops are beneficial, but not solid food, will suffer much more harm if he eat more than if he eat little, though he will feel pain even if he eat little. Now all the causes of the pain can be reduced to one, namely, it is the strongest foods that hurt a man most, and most obviously, whether he be well or ill. 75. What difference, then, can be seen between the purpose of him we call physician, who is an acknowledged handicraftsman, the discoverer of the mode of life, and of the nourishment suitable for the sick, and his who discovered and prepared originally nourishment for all men which we now use instead of the old savage and brutish mode of living? My own view is that their reasoning was identical and the discovery one and the same. The one sought to do away with those things which, when taken, the constitution of man and health could not assimilate because of their brutish and uncompounded character. The other those things which the temporary condition of an individual prevented him from assimilating. How do the two pursuits differ except in their scope? And in that the latter is more complex and requires the greater application, while the former is the starting point and came first in time. A consideration of the diet of the sick, as compared with that of men in health, would show that the diet of wild beasts and of animals generally is not more harmful, as compared with that of men in health. Take a man sick of a disease which is neither severe and desperate, nor yet altogether mild, but likely to be pronounced under wrong treatment, and suppose that he resolved to eat bread and meat, or any other food that is beneficial to men in health. Not much of it, but far less than he could have taken had he been well. Take again a man in health, with a constitution neither altogether weak nor altogether strong, and suppose he were to eat one of the foods that would be beneficial and strength-giving to an ox or a horse, vetches or barley or something similar, not much of it, but far less than he could take. If the man in health did this, he would suffer no less pain and danger than that sick man who took bread or barley cake at a time when he ought not. This goes to prove that this art of medicine, if research be continued on the same method, can all be discovered. If the matter were simple, as in these instances, and both sick and well were hurt by two strong foods, benefited and nourished by weaker foods, there would be no difficulty, for recourse to weaker food must have secured a great degree of safety. But as it is, if a man takes insufficient food, the mistake is as great as that of excess, and harms the man just as much. For abstinence has upon the human constitution a most powerful effect to enervate, to weaken, and to kill. Depletion produces many other evils, different from those of repletion, but just as severe. Wherefore, the greater complexity of these ills requires a more exact method of treatment, for it is necessary to aim at some measure. But no measure, neither number nor weight, by reference to which knowledge can be made exact, can be found except bodily feeling. Wherefore it is laborious to make knowledge so exact that only small mistakes are made here and there, and that physician who makes only small mistakes would win my hearty praise. Perfectly exact truth is but rarely to be seen, for most physicians seem to me to be in the same case as bad pilots. The mistakes of the latter are unnoticed so long as they are steering in a calm. But when a great storm overtakes them with a violent gale, all men realize clearly then that it is their ignorance and blundering which have lost the ship. So also, when bad physicians who comprise the great majority treat men who are suffering from no serious complaint, so that the greatest blunders would not affect them seriously, such illnesses occur very often, being far more common than serious disease. They are not shown up in their true colors to laymen, if their errors are confined to such cases, but when they meet with a severe, violent, and dangerous illness, then it is that their errors and want of skill are manifest to all. The punishment of the impostor, whether sailor or doctor, is not postponed, but follows speedily. That the discomforts a man feels after unseasonable abstinence are no less than those of unseasonable repletion, it were well to learn by a reference to men in health. For some of them benefit by taking one meal only each day, and because of this benefit, they make a rule of having only one meal. Others, again, because of the same reason that they are benefited thereby, take lunch also. Moreover, some have adopted one or other of these two practices for the sake of pleasure, or for some other chance reason. For the great majority of men can follow indifferently either the one habit or the other, and can take lunch or only one daily meal. Others, again, if they were to do anything outside what is beneficial, would not get off easily. But if they change their respective ways for a single day, nay, for a part of a single day, they suffer excessive discomfort. Some who lunch, although lunch does not suit them, forthwith become heavy and sluggish in body and in mind, a prey to yawning, drowsiness, and thirst. While if they go on to eat dinner as well, flatulence follows with colic and violent diarrhea. Many have found such action to result in a serious illness, even if the quantity of food they take twice a day be no greater than that which they have grown accustomed to digest once a day. On the other hand, if a man who has grown accustomed and has found it beneficial to take lunch should miss taking it, he suffers as soon as the lunch hour is past from prostrating weakness, trembling, and faintness. Hollowness of the eyes follows, urine becomes paler and hotter, and the mouth bitter, his bowels seem to hang. There come dizziness, depression, and listlessness. Besides all this, when he attempts to dine, he has the following troubles. His food is less pleasant, and he cannot digest what formerly he used to dine on when he had lunch. The mere food, descending into the bowels with colic and noise, burns them, and disturbed sleep follows, accompanied by wild and troubled dreams. Many such sufferers also have found these symptoms the beginning of an illness. See what, Flint? It is necessary to inquire into the cause why such symptoms come to these men. The one who had grown accustomed to one meal suffered, I think, because he did not wait sufficient time until his digestive organs had completely digested and assimilated the food taken the day before, and until they had become empty and quiet, but had taken fresh food while the organs were still in a state of hot turmoil and ferment. Such organs digest much more slowly than others and need longer rest and quiet. The man accustomed to take lunch, since no fresh nourishment was given him as soon as his body needed nourishment, when the previous meal was digested and there was nothing to sustain him, naturally wastes and pines away through want. For I put down to one all the symptoms which I have said such a man shows. And I assert furthermore that all other men besides, who when in good health fast for 2 or 3 days, will show the same symptoms as I have said those exhibit who do not take their lunch. Such constitutions, I contend, that rapidly and severely feel the effects of errors, are weaker than the other. A weak man is but one step removed from a sickly man, but a sickly man is weaker still, and is more apt to suffer distress whenever he misses the due season. And while the art can admit of such nice exactness, it is difficult always to attain perfect accuracy. But many departments of medicine have reached such a pitch of exactness, and I will speak about them later. I declare, however, that we ought not to reject the ancient art as non-existent, or on the ground that its method of inquiry is faulty, just because it has not attained exactness in every detail, but much rather, because it has been able by reasoning to rise from deep ignorance to approximately perfect accuracy. I think we ought to admire the discoveries as the work, not of chance, but of inquiry rightly and correctly conducted. But I want to return to the theory of those who prosecute their researches in the art after the novel fashion, building on a postulate. For if there be such a thing as heat, or cold, or dryness, or moistness, which injures a man, it necessarily follows that the scientific healer will counteract cold with hot, hot with cold, moist with dry, dry with moist. Now suppose we have a man whose constitution is not strong, but weaker than the average. Let this man's food be wheat straight from the threshing floor, unworked and uncooked and raw meat, and let his drink be water. The use of this diet will assuredly cause him much severe suffering. He will experience pains and physical weakness. His digestion will be ruined, and he will not be able to live long. Well, what remedy should be prepared for a man in this condition? Heat or cold or dryness or moistness? One of these plainly, for according to the theory of the new school, if the injury was caused by one of the opposites, the other opposite ought to be a specific. Of course, the most obvious as well as the most reliable medicine would be to abandon his old diet and to give him bread instead of wheat boiled meat, instead of RAW meat, and besides these things, a little wine to drink. This change must restore him to his health, unless indeed it has been entirely ruined by long continuance of the diet. What then shall we say? That he was suffering from cold, and that the taking of these hot things benefited him? Or shall we say the opposite? I think that I have nonplussed my opponent. For is it the heat of the wheat, or the cold, or the dryness, or the moistness, that the baker took away from it for a thing which has been ate or exposed to fire and to water, and has been made by many other things, each of which has its own individual property and nature, has lost some of its qualities, and has been mixed and combined with others? 14th. Of course, I know also that it makes a difference to a man's body, whether bread be of bolted or of unbolted flour, whether it be of winnowed or of unwinnowed wheat, whether it be kneaded with much water or with little, whether it be thoroughly kneaded or unkneaded, whether it be thoroughly baked or underbaked, and there are countless other differences. Barley cake varies in just the same way. The properties? 2 of each variety are powerful, and no one is like to any other. But how could he who has not considered these truths, or who considers them without learning, know anything about human ailments? For each of these differences produces in a human being an effect, and a change of one sort or another. and upon these differences is based all the dieting of a man, whether he be in health, recovering from an illness, or suffering from one. Accordingly, there could surely be nothing more useful or more necessary to know than these things, and how the first discoverers, pursuing their inquiries excellently and with suitable application of reason to the nature of man, made their discoveries and thought the art worthy to be ascribed to a god, as in fact is the usual belief. For they did not consider that the dry or the moist or the hot or the cold or anything else of the kind injures a man, or that he has need of any such thing, but they considered that it is the strength of each thing, that which being too powerful for the human constitution, it cannot assimilate, which causes harm, and this they sought to take away. The strongest part of the sweet is the sweetest, of the bitter the most bitter, of the acid the most acid, and each of all the component parts of man has its extreme. For these they saw are component parts of man, and that they are injurious to him. For there is in man salt and bitter, sweet and acid, astringent and insipid, and a vast number of other things, possessing properties of all sorts, both in number and in strength. These, when mixed and compounded with one another, are neither apparent, nor do they hurt a man. But when one of them is separated off, and stands alone, then it is apparent and hurts a man. Moreover, of the foods that are unsuitable for us and hurt a man when taken, each one of them is either bitter or salty or acid, or something else uncompounded and strong, and for this reason we are disordered by them. Just as we are by the secretions separated off in the body. But all things that a man eats or drinks are plainly altogether free from such an uncompounded and potent humor. For example, bread sample, bread cake, and such like, which men are accustomed constantly to use in great quantity, except the highly seasoned delicacies which gratify his appetite and greed. And from such foods, when plentifully partaken of by a man, there arises no disorder at all or isolation of the powers resident in the body, but strength, growth, and nourishment in great measure arise from them, for no other reason except that they are well compounded, and have nothing undiluted and strong, but form a single simple whole. You are at a loss to understand how those who maintain the other view, and abandon the old method to rest the art on a postulate, treat their patients on the lines of their postulate. For they have not discovered, I think, an absolute hot or cold, dry or moist, that participates in no other form. But one think that they have at their disposal the same foods and the same drinks as we all use. And to one they add the attribute of being hot, to another cold, to another dry, to another moist, since it would be futile to order a patient to take something hot, as he would at once ask, "What hot thing?" so that they must either talk nonsense or have recourse to one of these known substances. And if one hot thing happens to be astringent and another hot thing insipid, and a third hot thing causes flatulence, for there are many various kinds of hot things, possessing many opposite powers, surely it will make a difference whether he administers the hot astringent thing, or the hot insipid thing, or that which is cold and astringent at the same time, for there is such a thing, or the cold insipid thing. For I am sure that each of these pairs produces exactly the opposite of that produced by the other, not only in a man, but in a leathern or wooden vessel, and in many other things less sensitive than man. For it is not the heat which possesses the great power, but the astringent and the insipid, and the other qualities I have mentioned, both in man and out of man, whether eaten or drunk, whether applied externally as ointment or as plaster. And I believe that, of all the powers, none hold less sway in the body than cold and heat. My reasons are these. So long as the hot and cold in the body are mixed up together, they cause no pain. For the hot is tempered and moderated by the cold, and the cold by the hot. But when either is entirely separated from the other, then it causes pain. And at that season, when cold comes upon a man and causes him some pain, for that very reason internal heat first is present quickly and spontaneously, without needing any help or preparation. The result is the same, whether men be diseased or in health. For instance, if a man in health will cool his body in winter either by a cold bath or in any other way, the more he cools it, provided that his body is not entirely frozen, the more he becomes hotter than before when he puts his clothes on and enters his shelter. Again, if he will make himself thoroughly hot by means of either a hot bath of a large fire, and afterwards wear the same clothes and stay in the same place as he did when chilled, he feels far colder, and besides more shivery than before. Or if a man fan himself because of the stifling heat and make coolness for himself, on ceasing to do this in this way, he will feel 10 times the stifling heat felt by one who does nothing of the sort taught. Now the following is much stronger evidence still. All who go afoot through snow or great cold and become overchilled in feet, hands, or head, suffer at night very severely from burning and tingling when they come into a warm place and wrap up. In some cases, blisters arise like those caused by burning and fire, but it is not until they are warm that they experience these symptoms. So ready is cold to pass into heat and heat into cold. I could give a multitude of other proofs. But in the case of sick folk, is it not those who have suffered from shivering in whom breaks out the most acute fever? And not only is it not powerful, but after a while does it not subside, generally without doing harm all the time it remains, hot as it is, and passing through all the body, it ends in most cases in the feet, where the shivering and chill were most violent and lasted unusually long. Again, when the fever disappears with the breaking out of the perspiration, it cools the patient so that he is far colder than if he had never been attacked at all. What important or serious consequence, therefore, could come from that thing on which quickly supervenes in this way, its exact opposite, spontaneously annulling its effect? Or what need has it of elaborate tea or ointment? The opponent may retort, but patients whose fever comes from ardent fevers, pneumonia, or other virulent disease do not quickly get rid of their feverishness, and in these cases the heat and cold no longer alternate. Now I consider that herein lies my strongest evidence that men are not feverish merely through heat, and that it could not be the sole cause of the hot. The truth being that one and the same thing is both bitter and hot, or acid and hot, or salt and hot, with numerous other combinations, and cold again combines with other powers. It is these things which cause the harm. Heat, too, is present, but merely as a concomitant, having the strength of the directing factor which is aggravated and increases with the other factor, but having no power greater than that which properly belongs to it. CET. That this is so is plain if we consider the following pieces of evidence. First, we have the more obvious symptoms, which all of us often experience and will continue so to do. In the first place, those of us who suffer from cold in the head with discharge from the nostrils generally find this discharge more acrid than that which previously formed there and daily passed from the nostrils. It makes the nose swell and inflames it to an extremely fiery heat, as is shown if you put your hand upon it. And if the disease be present for an unusually long time, the part actually becomes ulcered, although it is without flesh and hard, but in some way the heat of the nostril ceases. Not when the discharge takes place and the inflammation is present, but when the running becomes thicker and less acrid, being matured and more mixed than it was before, then it is that the heat finally ceases. But in cases where the evil obviously comes from cold alone, unaccompanied by anything else, there is always the same change, heat following chill and chill heat, and these supervene at once and need no coction. In all other instances, where acrid and unmixed humors come into play, I am confident that the cause is the same, and that restoration results from coction and mixture. Cite Tanno. Again, such discharges as settle in the eyes, possessing powerful acrid humors of all sorts, ulcerate the eyelids, and in some cases eat into the parts onto which they run, the cheeks and under the eyes, and they rupture and eat through the covering of the eyeball. But pains, burning, and intense inflammation prevail until the discharges are concocted and become thicker, so that rheum is formed from them. This coction is the result of mixture, compounding, and digestion. Secondly, the discharges that settle in the throat, giving rise to soreness, angina, erysipelas, and pneumonia, all these at first emit salt, watery, and acrid humors, whereby the diseases are strengthened. But when they become thicker and more matured and throw off all trace of their acridness, then the fevers too subside with the other symptoms that distress the patient. We must surely consider the cause of each complaint to be those things, the presence of which of necessity produces a complaint of a specific kind. which ceases when they change into another combination. All conditions, then, resulting from heat or cold pure and simple, with no other power as a factor, must cease when heat changes into cold or cold into heat. This change takes place in the manner I have described above. Moreover, all other complaints to which man is liable arise from powers. Thus, when there is an outpouring of the bitter principle, which we call yellow bile, great nausea, burning, and weakness prevail. When the patient gets rid of it, sometimes by purgation, either spontaneous or by medicine, if the purging be seasonal, he manifestly gets rid both of the pains and of the heat. But so long as these bitter particles are undissolved, undigested, and uncompounded, by no possible means can the pains and fevers be stayed. And those who are attacked by pungent and acrid acids suffer greatly from frenzy, from gnawings of the bowels and chest, and from restlessness. No relief from these symptoms is secured until the acidity is purged away, or calmed down and mixed with the other humors. But coction, alteration, thinning or thickening into the form of humors through other forms of all sorts, wherefrom crises also and fixing their periods derive great importance in cases of illness. To all these things surely heat and cold are not in the least liable. For neither could either ferment or thicken, for what shall we call it, combinations of humors that exhibit a power that varies with the various factors f, since the hot will give up its heat only when mixed with the cold, and the cold can be but only of hot and cold mixed, produce only hot or cold, not a crisis. The sentence might be more relevantly placed at the end of chapter 18 as an explanation of the neutralized only by the hot, but all other components of man become milder and better the greater the number of other components with which they are mixed. A man is in the best possible condition when there is complete coction and rest, with no particular power displayed. About this, I think that I have given a full explanation. 20 certain physicians and philosophers assert that nobody can know medicine who is ignorant what a man is. He who would treat patients properly must, they say, learn this. But the question they raise is one for philosophy. It is the province of those who, like Empedocles, have written on natural science. What man is from the beginning, how he came into being at the first, and from what elements he was originally constructed. But my view is, first, that all that philosophers or physicians have said or written on natural science no more pertains to medicine than to painting. I also hold that clear knowledge about natural science can be acquired from medicine and from no other source, and that one can attain this knowledge when medicine itself has been properly comprehended. But till then it is quite impossible to possess this information, what man is, by what causes he is made, and similar points accurately. Since this, at least, I think a physician must know, and be at great pains to know, about natural science. If he is going to perform aught of his duty, what man is in relation to foods and drinks, and to habits generally, and what will be the effects of each on each individual. It is not sufficient to learn simply that cheese is a bad food as it gives a pain to one who eats a surfeit of it. We must know what the pain is, the reasons for it, and which constituent of man is harmfully affected. For there are many other bad foods and bad drinks which affect a man in different ways. I would therefore have the point put thus: undiluted wine, drunk in large quantity, produces a certain effect upon a man. Who know this would realize that this is a power of wine, and that wine itself is to blame, and we know through what parts of a man it chiefly exerts this power. Such nicety of truth I wish to be manifest in all other instances. Take my former example. Cheese does not harm all men alike. Some can eat their fill of it without the slightest hurt. Nay, those it agrees with are wonderfully strengthened thereby. Others come off badly. So the constitutions of these men differ, and the difference lies in the constituent of the body which is hostile to cheese, and is roused and stirred to action under its influence. Those in whom a humor of such a kind is present in greater quantity, and with greater control over the body, naturally suffer more severely. But if cheese were bad for the human constitution, without exception, it would have hurt all. He who knows the above truths will not fall into the following errors. 21. In convalescence from illness, and also in protracted illnesses, many disturbances occur, some spontaneously and some from things casually administered. I am aware that most physicians, like laymen, if the patient has done anything unusual near the day of the disturbance, taken a bath or a walk, or eaten strange food, these things being all beneficial, nevertheless assign the cause to one of them, and, while ignorant of the real cause, stop what may have been of the greatest value. Instead of so doing, they ought to know what will be the result of a bath unseasonably taken or a fatigue. For the trouble caused by each of these things is also peculiar to each, and so with surfeit or such and such food. Whoever therefore fails to know how each of these particulars affects a man will be able neither to discover their consequences nor to use them properly. 20. I hold that it is also necessary to know which diseased states arise from powers and which from structures. What I mean is roughly that a power is an intensity and strength of the humors, while structures are the conformations to be found in the human body, some of which are hollow, tapering from wide to narrow. Some are expanded, some hard and round, some broad and suspended, some stretched, some long, some close in texture, some loose in texture and fleshy, some spongy and porous. Now which structure is best adapted to draw and attract to itself fluid from the rest of the body, the hollow and expanded, the hard and round, or the hollow and tapering? I take it that the best adapted is the broad hollow that tapers. One should learn this thoroughly from unenclosed objects that can be seen. For example, if you open the mouth wide, you will draw in no fluid. But if you protrude and contract it, compressing the lips, and then insert a tube, you can easily draw up any liquid you wish. Again, cupping instruments, which are broad and tapering, are so constructed on purpose to draw and attract blood from the flesh. There are many other instruments of a similar nature. Of the parts within the human frame, the bladder, the head, and the womb are of this structure. These obviously attract powerfully and are always full of a fluid from without. Hollow and expanded parts are especially adapted for receiving effluid that has flowed into them, but are not so suited for attraction. Round solids will neither attract fluid nor receive it when it has flowed into them, for it would slip round and find no place on which to rest. Spongy porous parts, like the spleen, lungs, and breast, will drink up readily what is in contact with them, and these parts especially harden and enlarge on the addition of fluid. They will not be evacuated every day, as are bowels, where the fluid is inside, while the bowels themselves contain it externally. But when one of these parts drinks up the fluid and takes it to itself, the porous hollows, even the small ones, are everywhere filled, and the soft, porous part becomes hard and close, and neither digests nor discharges. This happens because of the nature of its structure. When wind and flatulence are produced in the body, the rumbling noise naturally occurs in the hollow broad parts, such as the bowels and the chest. For when the flatulence does not fill a part so as to be at rest, but moves and changes its position, it cannot be but that thereby noise and perceptible movements take place. In soft, fleshy parts occur numbness and obstructions, such as happen in apoplexy. And when flatulence meets a broad, resisting body and rushes on it, and this happens by nature to be neither strong so as to endure its violence without harm, nor soft and porous so as to give way and admit it, but tender, fleshy, full of blood, and close like the liver. Because it is close and broad, it resists without yielding, while the flatulence being checked increases and becomes stronger, dashing violently against the obstacle. But owing to its tenderness and the blood it contains, the part cannot be free from pain, and this is why the sharpest and most frequent pains occur in this region, and abscesses and tumors are very common. Violent pain, but much less severe, is also felt under the diaphragm, for the diaphragm is an extended, broad, and resisting substance of a stronger and more sinewy texture, and so there is less pain. But here too occur pains and tumors. 2050. There are many other structural forms, both internal and external, which differ widely from one another with regard to the experiences of a patient and of a healthy subject, such as whether the head be large or small, the neck thin or thick, long or short, the bowels long or round, the chest and ribs broad or narrow, and there are very many other things, the differences between which must all be known, so that knowledge of the causes of each thing may ensure that the proper precautions are taken. As I have said before, we must examine the powers of humors and what the effect of each is upon man, and how they are related to one another. Let me give an example. If a humor that is sweet assumes another form, not by admixture, but by a self-caused change, what will it first become? Bitter or salt or astringent or acid? I think acid. Therefore, where sweet humor is the least suitable of all, acid humor is the next least suitable to be administered. If a man can in this way conduct with success inquiries outside the human body, he will always be able to select the very best treatment, and the best is always that which is farthest removed from the unsuitable. Chapter 2. Airs, waters, places. Whoever wishes to pursue properly the science of medicine must proceed thus. First, he ought to consider what effects each season of the year can produce, for the seasons are not at all alike, but differ widely both in themselves and at their changes. The next point is the hot winds and the cold, especially those that are universal, but also those that are peculiar to each particular region. He must also consider the properties of the waters, for as these differ in taste and in weight, so the property of each is far different from that of any other. Therefore, on arrival at a town with which he is unfamiliar, a physician should examine its position with respect to the winds and to the risings of the sun. For a northern, a southern, an eastern, and a western aspect has each its own individual property. He must consider with the greatest care both these things and how the natives are off for water, whether they use marshy, soft waters, or such as are hard and come from rocky heights, or brackish and harsh. The soil, too, whether bare and dry, or wooded and watered, hollow and hot, or high and cold. The mode of life also of the inhabitants that is pleasing to them, whether they are heavy drinkers, taking lunch, and inactive, or athletic, industrious, eating much and drinking little. 1. Using this evidence, he must examine the several problems that arise. For if a physician know these things well, by preference all of them, but at any rate most, he will not, on arrival at a town with which he is unfamiliar, be ignorant of the local diseases or of the nature of those that commonly prevail, so that he will not be at a loss in the treatment of diseases or make blunders, as is likely to be the case if he have not this knowledge before he considers several problems. As time and the year passes, he will be able to tell what epidemic diseases will attack the city either in summer or in winter, as well as those peculiar to the individual which are likely to occur through change in mode of life. For knowing the changes of the seasons and the risings and settings of the stars, with the circumstances of each of these phenomena, he will know beforehand the nature of the year that is coming. Through these considerations, and by learning the times beforehand, he will have full knowledge of each particular case, will succeed best in securing health, and will achieve the greatest triumphs in the practice of his art. If it be thought that this belongs to meteorology, you will find out, on second thoughts, that the contribution of astronomy to medicine is not a very small one, but a very great one indeed. For with the seasons, men's diseases, like their digestive organs, suffer change. 3. I will now set forth clearly how each of the foregoing questions ought to be investigated, and the tests to be applied. A city that lies exposed to the hot winds. These are those between the winter rising of the sun and its winter setting. When subject to these and sheltered from the north winds, the waters here are plentiful and brackish, and must be near the surface. Hot in summer and cold in winter, the heads of the inhabitants are moist and full of phlegm, and their digestive organs are frequently deranged from the phlegm that runs down into them from the head. Most of them have a rather flabby physique, and they are poor eaters and poor drinkers. For men with weak heads will be poor drinkers, as the after effects are more distressing to them. The endemic diseases are these. In the first place, the women are unhealthy and subject to excessive fluxes. Then many are barren through disease and not by nature, while abortions are frequent. Children are liable to convulsions and asthma, and to what they think causes the disease of childhood, and to be a sacred disease. Men suffer from dysentery, diarrhea, ague, chronic fevers in winter, many attacks of eczema, and from hemorrhoids. Cases of pleurisy, pneumonia, ardent fever, and of diseases considered acute rarely occur. These diseases cannot prevail where the bowels are loose. Inflammations of the eyes occur with running, but are not serious. They are of short duration, unless a general epidemic take place after a violent change. When they are more than 50 years old, they are paralyzed by catarrhs supervening from the brain, when the sun suddenly strikes their head, or they are chilled. These are their endemic diseases, but besides, they are liable to any epidemic disease that prevails through the change of the seasons. But the following is the condition of cities with the opposite situation. Facing the cold winds that blow from between the summer setting and the summer rising of the sun, being habitually exposed to these winds, but sheltered from the hot winds and from the south. First, the waters of the region are generally hard and cold. The natives must be sinewy and spare, and in most cases, their digestive organs are costive and hard in their lower parts, but more relaxed in the upper. They must be bilious rather than phlegmatic. Their heads are healthy and hard, but they have in most cases a tendency to internal lacerations. Their endemic diseases are as follow. Pleurisy are common. Likewise, those diseases which are accounted acute. It must be so, since their digestive organs are hard, and the slightest cause inevitably produces in many patients abscesses, the result of a stiff body and hard digestive organs. For their dryness, combined with the coldness of the water, makes them liable to internal lacerations. Such constitutions necessarily make men eat much and drink little, for one cannot be both a great eater and a great drinker. Inflammations of the eyes occur at last. They are hard and violent, and rapidly cause rupture of the eyes. Men under 30 suffer from violent bleedings at the nose in summer. Instances of the disease, called sacred, are rare but violent. These men are more likely to be long-lived than are others. Their sores become neither phlegmatic nor malignant, but their characters incline to fierceness, not to mildness. For men, these diseases are endemic. Besides, there are epidemic diseases which may prevail through the change of the seasons. As to the women, firstly, many become barren through the waters being hard, indigestible, and cold. Their menstrual discharges are not healthy, but are scanty and bad. Then childbirth is difficult, although abortion is rare. After bearing children, they cannot rear them, for their milk is dried up through the hardness and indigestibility of the waters, while cases of phthisis are frequent after parturition, for the violence of it causes ruptures and strain. Children suffer from dropsies in the testicles while they are little, which disappear as they grow older. In such a city, puberty is late, the effects of hot winds and of cold winds on these cities are such as I've described. The following are the effects of winds on cities lying, suppurating, exposed to those between the summer and winter risings of the sun, and to those opposite to these. Those that lie towards the risings of the sun are likely to be healthier than those facing the north and those exposed to the hot winds, even though they be but a furlong apart. In the first place, the heat and the cold are more moderate. Then the waters that face the risings of the sun must be clear, sweet-smelling, soft, and delightful in such a city, for the sun shining down upon them where it rises purifies them. The persons of the inhabitants are better complexioned and more blooming than elsewhere, unless some disease prevents this. They are clear-voiced and with better temper and intelligence than those who are exposed to the north, just as all things growing there are better. A city so situated is just like spring, because the heat and the cold are tempered. The diseases, while resembling those which we said occur in cities facing the hot winds, are both fewer and less severe. The women there very readily conceive and have easy deliveries. Sixth are the conditions in these cities, those that lie towards the settings of the sun and are sheltered from the east winds, while the hot winds and the cold north winds blow past them. These cities must have a most unhealthy situation. In the first place, the waters are not clear, the reason being that in the morning mist is generally prevalent, which dissolves in the water and destroys its clearness, as the sun does not shine upon it before it is high on the horizon. In the summer, cold breezes blow in the morning, and there are heavy dews for the rest of the day. The sun, as it advances towards the west, thoroughly scorches the inhabitants, so that they are likely to be pale and sickly, subject to all the diseases aforesaid, for none are peculiar to them. They are likely to have deep, hoarse voices because of the atmosphere, since it is usually impure and unhealthy in such places. For while it is not clarified much by the north winds, which are not prevalent there, the winds that do prevail insistently are very rainy, such being the nature of westerly winds. Such a situation for a city is precisely like autumn in respect to the changes of the day, seeing that the difference between sunrise and afternoon is great. So much for winds, healthy and unhealthy. I wish now to treat of waters, those that bring disease or very good health, and of the ill or good that is likely to arise from water. For the influence of water upon health is very great. Such as are marshy, standing, and stagnant must in summer be hot, thick, and stinking, because there is no outflow. And as fresh rainwater is always flowing in, and the sun heats them, they must be of bad color, unhealthy, and bilious. In winter they must be frosty, cold, and turbid through the snow and frost, so as to be very conducive to phlegm and sore throats. Those who drink it have always large, stiff spleens and hard, thin, hot stomachs, while their shoulders, collarbones, and faces are emaciated. The fact is that their flesh dissolves to feed the spleen, so that they are lean. With such a constitution they eat and drink heavily. Their digestive organs, upper and lower, are very dry and very hot, so that they need more powerful drugs. This malady is endemic both in summer and in winter. In addition, the dropsies that occur are very numerous and very fatal. For in the summer there are epidemics of dysentery, diarrhea, and long quartan fever, which diseases, when prolonged, cause constitutions such as I have described to develop dropsies that result in death. These are their maladies in summer. In winter, young people suffer from pneumonia and illnesses, attended by delirium, the older, through the hardness of their digestive organs, from ardent fever. Among the women occur swellings and leukophlegmasia that they conceive hardly, and are delivered with difficulty. The babies are big and swollen, and then, as they are nursed, they become emaciated and miserable. The discharge after childbirth is bad. Children are very subject to hernia, and men to enlarged veins and to ulcers on the legs, so that such constitutions cannot be long-lived, but must grow prematurely old. Moreover, the women appear to be with child, yet when the time of delivery comes, the fullness of the womb disappears, this being caused by dropsy in that organ. Such waters I hold to be absolutely bad. The next worst will be those whose springs are from rocks, for they must be hard, or from earth, where there are hot waters, or iron is to be found, or copper, or silver, or gold, or sulfur, or alum, or bitumen, or fire. For all these result from the violence of the heat. So from such earth good waters cannot come, but hard heating waters, difficult to pass and causing constipation. The best are those that flow from high places and earthy hills. By themselves they are sweet and clear, and the wine they can stand is but little. In winter they are warm, in summer cold. They would naturally be so, coming from very deep springs. I commend especially those whose flow breaks forth towards the rising by preference the summer rising of the sun, for they must be brighter, sweet-smelling, and light, while all that are salt, harsh, and hard are not good to drink. Though there are some constitutions and some diseases which are benefited by drinking such waters, concerning which I will speak presently. Aspect affects spring waters thus. Those whose sources face the risings of the sun are the very best. Second, in excellence come those between the summer risings and the summer settings, by preference in the direction of the risings. Third best are those between the summer and winter settings. The worst are those that face the south, and those between the winter rising and setting. These are very, very bad indeed when the winds are in the south, less bad when they are in the north. Spring water should be used thus. A man in health and strength can drink any water that is at hand without distinction, but he who, because of dis et assi, wishes to drink the most suitable, can best attain health in the following way. Those whose digestive organs are hard and easily heated will gain benefit from the sweetest, lightest, and most sparkling waters. But those whose bellies are soft, moist, and phlegmatic benefit from the hardest, most harsh, and saltish waters, for these are the best to dry them up. For waters that are best for cooking and most solvent naturally loosen the digestive organs the most, and relax them, But harsh waters, hard and very bad for cooking, contract most these organs and dry them up. In fact, the public are mistaken about saline waters through inexperience, in that they are generally considered to be laxative. The truth is that they are just the reverse. They are harsh and bad for cooking, so that the digestive organs too are stiffened by them rather than loosened. Eat. Such are the facts about spring waters. I will now proceed to speak of rainwater and snow water. Rainwaters are the lightest, sweetest, finest, and clearest. To begin with, the sun raises and draws up the finest and lightest part of water, as is proved by the formation of salt. The brine, owing to its coarseness and weight, is left behind and becomes salt. The finest part, owing to its lightness, is drawn up by the sun. Not only from pools does the sun raise this part, but also from the sea and from whatever has moisture in it, and there is moisture in everything. Even from men, it raises the finest and lightest part of their juices. The plainest evidence thereof is that when a man walks or sits in the sun, wearing a cloak, the parts of his skin reached by the sun will not sweat, for it draws up each layer of sweat as it appears. But those parts sweat which are covered by his cloak or by anything else, for the sweat drawn forcibly out by the sun is prevented by the covering from disappearing through the sun's power. But when the man has come into a shady place, his whole body sweats alike, as the sun no longer shines upon it. For this reason, too, rainwater grows foul quicker than any other, and has a bad smell. Being a mixture gathered from very many sources, it grows foul very quickly. Furthermore, when it has been carried away aloft, and has combined with the atmosphere as it circles round, the turbid, dark part of it separates out, changes, and becomes mist and fog, while the clearest and lightest part of it remains. It is sweetened as the heat of the sun produces coction, just as all other things always become sweeter through coction. Now, as long as it is scattered and uncondensed, it travels about aloft, but as soon as it collects anywhere and is compressed into one place owing to sudden contrary winds, then it bursts wherever the most compression happens to take place. For this is more likely to occur when the clouds, set in motion and carried along by a wind that allows them no rest, are suddenly encountered by a contrary blast and by other clouds. In such cases, the front is compressed, the rear comes on, and is thus thickened, darkened, and compressed into one place, so that the weight bursts it and causes rain. Such waters are naturally the best, but they need to be boiled and purified from foulness if they are not to have a bad smell and give sore throat, coughs, and hoarseness to those who drink them. Waters from snow and ice are all bad. For once frozen, water never recovers its original nature, but the clear, light, sweet part is separated out and disappears, while the muddiest and heaviest part remains. The following experiment will prove it. Pour by measure in winter water into a vessel and set it in the open where it will freeze best. Then on the next day, bring it under cover where the ice will melt best. If, when it is dissolved, you measure it again, you will find it much. This shows that freezing dries up and causes to disappear the lightest and finest part, not the heaviest and coarsest, to do which it has no power. In this way, therefore, I am of opinion that such waters derived from snow or ice and waters similar to these are the worst for all purposes. Yet such are the properties of rain waters and of those from snow and ice. Stone kidney disease, strangury, and sciatica are very apt to attack people, and ruptures occur when they drink water of very many different kinds, or from large rivers into which other rivers flow, or from a lake fed by many streams of various sorts. And whenever they use foreign waters coming from a great, not a short distance, for one water cannot be like another. Some are sweet, others are impregnated with salt and alum, others flow from Hoti springs. These, when mixed up together, disagree, and the strongest always prevails. But the strongest is not always the same. Sometimes it is one, sometimes another, according to the winds. One has its strength from a north wind, another from the south wind, and similarly with the others. Such waters then must leave a sediment of mud and sand in the vessels, and drinking them causes the diseases mentioned before. That there are exceptions I will proceed to set forth. Those whose bowels are loose and healthy, whose bladder is not feverish, and the mouth of whose bladder is not over narrow, pass water easily, and no solid matter forms in their bladder. But feverishness of the bowels must be accompanied by feverishness of the bladder. For when it is abnormally heated, its mouth is inflamed. In this condition, it does not expel the urine, but concaes and heats it within itself. The finest part is separated off, and the clearest passes out as urine, while the thickest and muddiest part forms solid matter, which, though at first small, grows in course of time. For as it rolls about in the urine, it coalesces with whatever solid matter forms, and so it grows and hardens. When the patient makes water, it is forced by the urine to fall against the mouth of the bladder, and staying the flow of the urine causes violent pain, so that boys that suffer from stone rub and pull at their privy parts, under the impression that there lies the cause of their making water. That my account is correct is shown by the fact that sufferers from stone emit urine that is very clear, as the thickest and muddiest part of it remains and solidifies. This, in most cases, is the cause of stone. Children get stone also from the milk, if it be unhealthy, too hot and bilious, for it heats the bowels and the bladder, so that the urine is heated and affected, as I have described. And my opinion is that we should give to young children only very diluted wine, which heats and parches the veins less. Females suffer less from stone, for their urethra is short and broad, so that the urine is easily expelled. Nor do they rub the privy parts as do males, nor handle the urethra, for it opens directly into the privy parts, which is not so with males, nor is their urethra wide. And they drink more than boys do, extant. This, or something very like this, is the truth concerning these matters. As to the seasons, a consideration of the following points will make it possible to decide whether the year will prove unhealthy or healthy. If the signs prove normal when the stars set and rise, if there be rains in autumn, if the winter be moderate, neither too mild nor unseasonably cold, and if the rains be seasonable in spring and in summer, the year is likely to be very healthy. If, on the other hand, the winter prove dry and northerly, the spring rainy and southerly, the summer cannot fail to be fever-laden, causing ophthalmia. For whenever the great heat comes on suddenly, while the earth is soaked by reason of the spring rains and the south wind, the heat cannot fail to be doubled, coming from the hot sodden earth and the burning sun. Men's bowels not being braced, nor their brain dried for, when spring is such the body, and its flesh must necessarily be flabby fevers, that attack are of the acutest type in all cases, especially among the phlegmatic. Dysenteries are also likely to come upon women in the most humid constitutions. If at the rising of the dog star stormy rain occurs, and the Etesian winds blow, there is hope that the distempers will cease, and that the autumn will be healthy. Otherwise there is danger lest deaths occur among the women and children, and least of all among the old men, and lest those that get better lapse into quartans, and from quartans into dropsies. But if the winter be southerly, rainy, and mild, and the spring be northerly, dry, and wintry, in the first place, women with child whose delivery is due by spring suffer abortion, and if they do bring forth, their children are weak and sickly, so that either they die at once or live puny. Weak and sickly, such is the fate of the women. The others have dysenteries and dry ophthalmia, and in some cases catarrhs descend from the head to the lungs. Phlegmatics are liable to dysenteries, and women also, flame running down from the brain because of the humidity of their constitution. The bilious have dry ophthalmia because of the warm dryness of their flesh. Old men have catarrhs because of their flabbiness and the wasting of their veins, so that some die suddenly, while others become paralyzed on the right side or the left. For whenever, owing to the winter being southerly and the body warm, neither brain nor veins are hardened, a northerly, dry, cold spring supervening the brain, just at the time when it ought to have been relaxed, along with spring and purged by cold in the head and hoarseness, congeals and hardens, so that the heat of summer having suddenly supervened and the change supervening, these diseases befall. Such cities as are well situated with regard to sun and winds and use good waters are less affected by such changes. But if they use marshy or standing waters, and are not well situated with regard to winds and sun, they are more affected. If the summer prove dry, the diseases cease more quickly. If it be rainy, they are protracted. Sores are apt to fester from the slightest cause, dysenteries, and dropsies supervene on the conclusion of the diseases, as the bowels do not readily dry up. If the summer and the autumn be rainy and southerly, the winter must be unhealthy. Phlegmatics and men over 40 are likely to suffer from ardent fevers, bilious people from pleurisy and pneumonia. If the summer prove dry and northerly, and the autumn rainy and southerly, it is likely that in winter headaches occur and mortifications of the brain, and in addition hoarseness, colds in the head, coughs, and in some cases consumption as well. But if the weather be northerly and dry, with no rain either during the dog star or Arcturus, it is very beneficial to those who have a phlegmatic or humid constitution, and to women, but it is very harmful to the bilies. For these dry up overmuch and are attacked by dry ophthalmia and by acute protracted fevers, in some cases too by melancholies. For the most humid and watery part of the bile is dried up and is spent, while the thickest and most acrid part is left, and similarly with the blood. Consequently, these diseases come upon them. But all these conditions are helpful to the phlegmatic, for they dry up and reach winter dried up and not flabby ways. By studying and observing after this fashion, one may foresee most of the consequences of the changes. One should be especially on one's guard against the most violent changes of the seasons, and unless compelled, one should neither purge nor apply cautery or knife to the bowels before at least 10 days have passed. The following are the 4 most violent changes and the most dangerous. Both solstices, especially the summer solstice, both the equinoxes, so reckoned, especially the autumnal. One must also guard against the risings of the stars, especially of the dog star, then of Arcturus, and also of the setting of the Pleiades. For it is especially at these times that diseases come to a crisis. Some prove fatal, some come to an end, all others change to another form and another constitution. 12 feet. So much for the changes of the seasons. Now I intend to compare Asia and Europe, and to show how they differ in every respect, and how the nations of the one differ entirely in physique from those of the other. It would take too long to describe them all, so I will set forth my views about the most important and the greatest differences. Hold that Asia differs very widely from Europe in the nature of all its inhabitants and of all its vegetation. For everything in Asia grows to far greater beauty and size. The one region is less wild than the other. The character of the inhabitants is milder and more gentle. The cause of this is the temperate climate. Because it lies towards the east, midway between the risings of the sun and farther away than is Europe from the cold growth and freedom from wildness, are most fostered when nothing is forcibly predominant, but equality in every respect prevails. Asia, however, is not everywhere uniform. The region, however, situated midway between the heat and the cold, is very fruitful, very wooded, and very mild. It has splendid water, whether from rain or from spring. While it is not burned up with the heat, nor dried up by drought and want of water, it is not oppressed with cold, nor yet damp and wet with excessive rains and snow. Here the harvests are likely to be plentiful, both those from seed and those which the earth bestows of her own accord, the fruit of which men use, turning wild to cultivated, and transplanting them to a suitable soil. The cattle, too reared, there are like light to flourish, and especially to bring forth the sturdiest young, and rear them to be very fine creatures too. The men will be well nourished, a very fine physique and very tall, differing from one another but little either in physique or stature. This region, both in character and in the mildness of its seasons, might fairly be said to bear a close resemblance to spring courage, endurance. Industry and high spirit could not arise in such conditions, either among the natives or among immigrants, but pleasure must be supreme. Wherefore in the beasts there are of many shapes. 13. Such, in my opinion, is the condition of the Egyptians and Libyans. As to the dwellers on the right of the summer risings of the sun up to Lake Maotis, which is the boundary between Europe and Asia, their condition is as follows. These nations are less homogeneous than those I have described, because of the changes of the seasons and the character of the region. The land is affected by them exactly as human beings in general are affected. For where the seasons experience the most violent and the most frequent changes, the land too is very wild and very uneven. You will find there many wooded mountains, plains, and meadows. But where the seasons do not alter much, the land is very even. So it is too with the inhabitants, if you will examine the matter. Some physiques resemble wooded, well-watered mountains, others light, dry land, others marshy meadows, others a plain of bare, parched earth. For the seasons which modify a physical frame differ. If the differences be great, the more too are the differences in the shapes. The races that differ but little from one another I will omit, and describe the condition only of those which differ greatly, whether it be through nature or through custom. I will begin with the longheads. There is no other race at all with heads like theirs. Originally, custom was chiefly responsible for the length of the head, but now custom is reinforced by nature. Those that have the longest heads they consider the noblest, and their custom is as follows. As soon as a child is born, they remodel its head with their hands, while it is still soft and the body tender, and force it to increase in length by applying bandages and suitable appliances, which spoil the roundness of the head and increase its length. Custom originally so acted that through force such a nature came into being, but as time went on, the process became natural, so that custom no longer exercised compulsion. For the seed comes from all parts of the body, healthy seed from healthy parts, diseased seed from diseased parts. If therefore bald parents have for the most part bald children, gray-eyed parents, gray-eyed children, squinting parents, squinting children, and so on with other physical peculiarities, what prevents a long-headed parent having a long-headed child? 2, at the present time, long-headedness is less common than it was. For owing to intercourse with other men, the custom is less prevalent. These are my opinions about the longheads. Now let me turn to the dwellers on the faces. Their land is marshy, hot, wet, and wooded. Copious, violent rains fall there during every season. The inhabitants live in the marshes, and their dwellings are of wood and built in the water. They make little use of walking in the city and the harbor, but sail up and down in dugouts made from a single log, for canals are numerous. The waters which they drink are hot and stagnant, putrefied by the sun and swollen by the rains. The Phasis itself is the most stagnant and most sluggish of all rivers. The fruits that grow in this country are all stunted, flabby, and imperfect, owing to the excess of water, and for this reason they do not ripen. Much fog from the waters envelops the land. For these causes, therefore, the physique of the Phasians is different from that of other folk. They are tall in stature, and of a gross habit of body, while neither joint nor vein is visible. Their complexion is yellowish, as though they suffered from jaundice. Of all men they have the deepest voice, because the air they breathe is not clear, but moist and turbid. They are by nature disinclined for physical fatigue. There are but slight changes of the seasons, either in respect of heat or of cold. The winds are mostly moist, except one breeze peculiar to the country, called synchron, which sometimes blows strong, violent, and hot. The north wind rarely blows, and when it does, it is weak and gentle. Sit still. So much for the difference in nature and in shape between the inhabitants of Asia and the inhabitants of Europe. With regard to the lack of spirit and of courage among the inhabitants, the chief reason why Asiatics are less warlike and more gentle in character than Europeans is the uniformity of the seasons, which show no violent changes either towards heat or towards cold, but are equable. For there occur no mental shocks, nor violent physical change, which are more likely to steel the temper and impart to it a fierce passion that is a monotonous sameness. For it is changes of all things that rouse the temper of man and prevent its stagnation. For these reasons I think Asiatics are feeble. Their institutions are a contributory cause, the greater part of Asia being governed by kings. Now where men are not their own masters and independent, but are ruled by despots, they are not keen on military efficiency, but on not appearing warlike, for the risks they run are not similar. Subjects are likely to be forced to undergo military service, fatigue, and death in order to benefit their masters, and to be parted from their wives, their children, and their friends. All their worthy brave deeds merely serve to aggrandize and raise up their lords, while the harvest they themselves reap is danger and death. Moreover, the land of men like these must be desert, owing to their enemies and to their laziness, so that even if a naturally brave and spirited man is born, his temper is changed by their institutions. Whereof I can give a proof. All the inhabitants of Asia a scattered Greek or non-Greek who are not ruled by despots, but are independent, toiling for their own advantage, are the most warlike of all men. For it is for their own sakes that they run their risks, and in their own persons do they receive the prizes of their valor, as likewise the penalty of their cowardice. You will find that Asiatics also differ from one another, some being superior, others inferior. The reason for this, as I have said above, is the changes of the seasons. Such is the condition of the inhabitants of Asia. And in Europe is a Scythian race, dwelling round Lake Maeotis, which differs from the other races. Their name is Sarmatai. Their women, so long as they are virgins, ride, shoot, throw the javelin while mounted, and fight with their enemies. They do not lay aside their virginity until they have killed 3 of their enemies, and they do not marry before they have performed the traditional sacred rites. A woman who takes to herself a husband no longer rides, unless she is compelled to do so by a general expedition. They have no right breast, for while they are yet babies, their mothers make red-hot a bronze instrument constructed for this very purpose and apply it to the right breast and cauterize it, so that its growth is arrested, and all its strength and bulk are diverted to the right shoulder and right arm. Easty is to the physique of the other Scythians, in that they are like one another and not at all like others. The same remark applies to them as to the Egyptians. Only the latter are distressed by the heat, the former by the cold. What is called the Scythian desert is level grassland without trees, and feral well watered, for there are large rivers which drain the water from the plains. There too live the Scythians, who are called nomads, because they have no houses but live in wagons. The smallest have 4 wheels, others 6 wheels. They are covered over with felt and are constructed, like houses, sometimes in 2 compartments, and sometimes in 3, which are proof against rain, snow, and wind. The wagons are drawn by 2 or by 3 yoke of hornless oxen. They have no horns because of the cold. Now in these wagons live the women, while the men ride alone on horseback, followed by the sheep they have, their cattle, and their horses. They remain in the same place just as long as there is sufficient fodder for their animals. When it gives out, they migrate. They themselves eat boiled meats and drink mare's milk. They have a sweetmeat called hippos, which is from the milk of mares, hippodianti. So much for their mode of living and their customs. As to their seasons and their physique, the Scythians are very different from all other men, and like the Egyptians, are homogeneous. They are the reverse of prolific, and Scythia breeds the smallest and the fewest wild animals. For it lies right sea loose to the north, and the Rhipaean mountains, from which blows the north wind. The sun comes nearest to them only at the end of its course, when it reaches the summer solstice, and then it warms them but slightly, and for a short time. The winds blowing from hot regions do not reach them, save rarely and with little force. But from the north there are constantly blowing winds that are chilled by snow, ice, and many waters, which, never leaving the mountains, render them uninhabitable. A thick fog envelops by day the plains upon which they live, so that winter is perennial, while summer, which is but feeble, lasts only a few days. For the plains are high and bare, and are not encircled with mountains, though they slope from the north. The wild animals, too, that are found there are not large, but such as can find shelter underground. They are stunted owing to the severe climate and the bareness of the land, where there is neither warmth to nor shelter, and the changes of the seasons are neither great nor violent, the seasons being uniform and altering but little. Wherefore the men also are like one another in physique, since summer and winter they always use similar food, and the same clothing, breathing a moist, thick atmosphere, drinking water from ice and snow, and abstaining from fatigue. For neither bodily nor mental endurance is possible where the changes are not violent. For these causes their physiques are gross, fleshy, showing no joints, moist and flabby, and the lower bowels are as moist as bowels can be. For the belly cannot possibly dry up in a land like this, with such a nature and such a climate. But because of their fat and the smoothness of their flesh, their physiques are similar, men's to men's and women's to women's. For as the seasons are alike, there takes place no corruption or deterioration in the coagulation of the seed, except through the blow of some violent cause or of some disease. I will give clear testimony to their moistness. The majority of the Scythians, all that are nomads, you will find have their shoulders cauterized, as well as their arms, wrists, breast, hips, and loins, simply because of the moistness and softness of their constitution. For owing to their moistness and flabbiness, they have not the strength either to draw a bow or to throw a javelin from the shoulder. But when they have been cauterized, the excess of moisture dries up from their joints, and their bodies become more braced, more nourished, and better articulated. Their bodies grow relaxed and squat, firstly because unlike the Egyptians, they do not use swaddling clothes, of which they have not the habit, for the sake of their riding, that they may sit a horse well. Secondly, through their sedentary lives. For the boys, until they can ride, sit the greater part of the time in the wagon, and because of the migrations and wanderings rarely walk on foot, while the girls are wonderfully flabby and torpid in physique. The Scythians are a ruddy race because of the cold, not through any fierceness in the sun's heat. It is the cold that burns their white skin and turns it ruddy. Constitution of this kind prevents fertility. The men have no great desire for intercourse because of the moistness of their constitution and the softness and chill of their abdomen, which are the greatest checks on venery. Moreover, the constant jolting on their horses unfits them for intercourse. Such are the causes of barrenness in the men. In the women, they are the fatness and moistness of their flesh, which are such that the womb cannot absorb the seed. For neither is their monthly purging as it should be, but scanty and late, while the mouth of the womb is closed by fat and does not admit the seed. They are personally fat and lazy, and their abdomen is cold and soft. These are the causes which make the Scythian race unfertile. A clear proof is afforded by their slave girls. These, because of their activity and leanness of body, no sooner go to a man than they are with child. Moreover, the great majority among the Scythians become impotent, do women's work, live like women, and converse accordingly. Such men they call Anaries. Now the natives put the blame onto heaven and respect and worship these creatures, each fearing for himself. I too think that these diseases are divine, and so are all others, no one being more divine or more human than the other. All are alike and all divine. Each of them has a nature of its own, and none arises without its natural cause. How, in my opinion, this disease arises, I will explain. The habit of riding causes swellings at the joints, because they are always astride their horses. In severe cases follow lameness and sores on the hips. They cure themselves in the following way. At the beginning of the disease, they cut the vein behind each ear. When the blood has ceased to flow, faintness comes over them, and they sleep. Afterwards they get up, some cured and some not. Now, in my opinion, by this treatment the seed is destroyed, for by the side of the ear are veins to cut which causes impotence, and I believe that these are the veins which they cut. After this treatment, when the Scythians approach a woman but cannot have intercourse, at first they take no notice and think no more about it. But when 2, 3, or even more attempts are attended with no better success, thinking that they have sinned against heaven, they attribute thereto the cause, and put on women's clothes, holding that they have lost their manhood. So they play the woman, and with the women do the same work as women do. This affliction affects the rich Scythians because of their riding, not the lower classes, but the upper, who possess the most strength. The poor who do not ride suffer less. But if we suppose this disease to be more divine than any other, it ought to have attacked not the highest and richest classes only of the Scythians, but all classes equally, or rather the poor especially. If indeed the gods are pleased to receive from men respect and worship, and repay these with favors, for naturally the rich, having great wealth, make many sacrifices to the gods, and offer many votive offerings and honor them, all of which things the poor, owing to their poverty, are less able to do. Besides, they blame the gods for not giving them wealth, so that the penalties for such sins are likely to be paid by the poor rather than by the rich. But the truth is, as I said above, these affections are neither more nor less divine than any others, and all and each are natural. Such a disease arises among the Scythians for such a reason as I have stated, and other men too are equally liable to it, for men ride very much and very frequently. There, the majority are attacked by swellings at the joints, sciatica, and gout, and are sexually very weak. And they are the most impotent of men for the reasons I have given, and also because they always wear trousers, and spend most of their time on their horses, so that they do not handle the parts, but owing to fatigue forget about sexual passion, losing their virility before any impulse is felt. 23. Such is the condition of the Scythians. The other people of Europe differ from one another both in stature and in shape, because of the changes of the seasons, which are violent and frequent. While there are severe heat waves, severe winters, copious rains, and then long droughts and winds, causing many changes of various kinds. Wherefore suns are frequent than when they are similar or alike. The same reasoning applies also to character. In such a climate arise wildness, unsociability, and spirit, for the frequent shocks to the mind impart wildness, destroying tameness and gentleness. For this reason, I think Europeans are also more courageous than Asiatics. For uniformity engenders slackness, while variation fosters endurance in both body and soul. Rest and slackness are food for cowardice, endurance, and exertion for bravery. Wherefore Europeans are more warlike, and also because of their institutions, not being under kings as are Asiatics. For as I said above, where there are kings, there must be the greatest cowards. For men's souls are enslaved, and refuse to run risks readily and recklessly to increase the power of somebody else. But independent people, taking risks on their own behalf, and not on behalf of others, are willing and eager to go into danger, for they themselves enjoy the prize of victory. So institutions contribute a great deal to the formation of courageousness. 24. Such, in outline and in general, is the character of Europe and of Asia. In Europe, too, there are tribes differing one from another in stature, in shape, and in courage. The differences are due to the same causes as I mentioned above, which I will now describe more clearly. Inhabitants of a region which is mountainous, rugged, high, and watered, where the changes of the seasons exhibit sharp contrasts, are likely to be of big physique, with a nature well adapted for endurance and courage, and such possess not a little wildness and ferocity. The inhabitants of hollow regions that are meadowy, stifling, with more hot than cool winds, and where the water used is hot, will be neither tall nor well made, but inclined to be broad, fleshy, and dark-haired. They themselves are dark rather than fair, less subject to phlegm than to bile. Similar bravery and endurance are not by nature part of their character, but the imposition of law can produce them artificially. Should there be rivers in the land, which drain off from the ground the stagnant water, and the rain water, these, will be healthy and bright, even if there be no rivers, and the water that the people drink be marshy, stagnant, and fenny, the physique of the people must show protruding bellies and enlarged spleens. Such as dwell in a high land, that is level, windy, and watered, will be tall in physique and similar to one another, but rather unmanly and tame in character. As to those that dwell on thin, dry, and bare soil, and where the changes of the seasons exhibit sharp contrasts, it is likely that in such country the people will be hard in physique and well-braced, fair, rather than dark, stubborn, and independent in character and in temper. For where the changes of the seasons are most frequent and most sharply contrasted, there you will find the greatest diversity in physique, in character, and in constitution. These are the most important factors that create differences in men's constitutions. Next come the land in which a man is reared, and the water. For in general you will find assimilated to the nature of the land both the physique and the characteristics of the inhabitants. For where the land is rich, soft, and well watered, and the water is very near the surface, so as to be hot in summer and cold in winter, and if the situation be favorable as regards the seasons, there the inhabitants are fleshy, ill-articulated, moist, lazy, and generally cowardly character. Slackness and sleepiness can be observed in them, and as far as the arts are concerned, they are thick-witted, and neither subtle nor sharp, but where the land is bare, waterless, rough, oppressed by winter storms and burnt by the sun, there you will see men who are hard, lean, well-articulated, well-braced, and hairy. Such natures will be found energetic, vigilant, stubborn, and independent in character and in temper, wild rather than tame. Not more than average sharpness and intelligence in the arts, and in war of more than average courage. The things also that grow in the earth all assimilate themselves to the earth. Such are the most sharply contrasted natures and physiques. Take these observations as a standard when drawing all other conclusions, and you will make no mistake. Chapter 3. Epidemics I and III, First Constitution. I in Thassos during autumn, about the time of the equinox to near the setengee of the Pleiades, there were many rains, gently continuous, with southerly winds. Winter southerly, north winds light, droughts. On the whole, the winter was like a spring. Spring southerly and chilly, slight showers. Summer in general cloudy, no rain. Etesian winds few, light and irregular. The whole weather proved southerly, with droughts, but early in the spring, as the previous constitution had proved the opposite and northerly. A few patients suffered from ardent fevers, and these very mild, causing hemorrhage in few cases, and no deaths. Many had swellings beside one ear, or both ears, in most cases unattended with fever, so that confinement to bed was unnecessary. In some cases there was slight heat, but in all the swellings subsided without causing harm. In no case was there suppuration such as attends swellings of other origin. This was the character of them, flabby, big, spreading, with neither inflammation nor pain. In every case, they disappeared without a sign. The sufferers were youths, young men, and men in their prime, usually those who frequented the wrestling school and gymnasia. Few women were attacked. Many had dry coughs, which brought up nothing when they coughed, but their voices were hoarse. Soon after, though in some cases after some time, painful inflammations occurred either in one testicle or in both, sometimes accompanied with fever, in other cases not. Usually they caused much suffering. In other respects, the people had no ailments requiring medical assistance, beginning early in the summer, throughout the summer, and in winter. Many of those who had been ailing a long time took to their beds in a state of consumption, while many also, who had hitherto been doubtful sufferers at this time, showed undoubted symptoms. Some showed the symptoms now for the first time. These were those whose constitution inclined to be consumptive. Many, in fact, most of these died. Those who took to their beds, I do not know one who survived even for a short time. Death came more promptly than is usual in consumption, and yet the other complaints, which will be described presently, though longer and attended with fever, were easily supported and did not prove fatal. For consumption was the worst of the diseases that occurred and alone was responsible for the great mortality. In the majority of cases, the symptoms were these: fever with shivering, continuous, acute, not completely intermitting, but of the semi-tertian type. Remitting during one day, they were exacerbated on the next. Becoming on the whole more acute, sweats were continual, but not all over the body. Severe chill in the extremities, which with difficulty recovered their warmth. Bowels disordered with bilious, scanty, unmixed, thin, smarting stools, causing the patient to get up often. Urine either thin, colorless, unconcocted, and scanty, or thick and with a slight deposit. Not settling favorably, but with a crude and unfavorable deposit. The patients frequently coughed up small concocted sputa, brought up little by little AA difficulty. Those exhibiting the symptoms in their most violent form showed no concoction at all, but continued spitting crude sputa. In the majority of these cases, the throat was throughout painful from the beginning, being red and inflamed. Fluxes slight, thin, pungent. Patients quickly wasted away and grew worse, being throughout averse to all food and experiencing no thirst. Delirium in many cases as death approached. Such were the symptoms of the consumption illi. But when summer came, and during autumn occurred many continuous but not violent fevers, which attacked persons who were long ailing without suffering distress in any other particular manner. For the bowels were in most cases quite easy, and hurt to no appreciable extent. Urine in most cases of good color and clear but thin, and after a time near the crisis it grew concocted. Coughing was slight and caused no distress. No lack of appetite. In fact, it was quite possible even to give food. In general, the patients did not sicken, as did the consumptives with shivering fevers, but with slight sweats, the paroxysms being variable and irregular. Earliest crisis was about the 20th day. In most cases, the crisis was about the 40th day, though in many it was about the 80th. In some cases, the illness did not end in this way, but in an irregular manner without a crisis. In the majority of these cases, the fevers relapsed after a brief interval, and after the relapse a crisis occurred at the end of the same periods as before. The disease in many of these instances was so protracted that it even lasted during the winter. Out of all those described in this constitution, only the consumptives showed a high mortality rate, for all the other patients bore up well, and the other fevers did not prove fatal. Second P constitution, or fourth E. In Thassos, early autumn occurred unseasonable wintry storms, suddenly with many north and south winds bursting out into rains. These conditions continued until the setting of the Pleiades and during their season. Winter was northerly, many violent and abundant rains, snows, generally there were fine intervals. With all this, however, the cold weather was not exceptionally unseasonable. But immediately after the winter solstice, when the west wind usually begins to blow, there was a return of severe wintry weather, much north wind, snow and copious rains continuously, sky stormy and clouded. These conditions lasted on and did not remit before the equinox. Spring cold, northerly, wet, cloudy. Summer did not turn out excessively hot, the Etesian winds blowing continuously. But soon after, near the rising of Arcturus, there was much rain again with northerly winds the whole year having been wet, cold, and northerly. In the winter, the public health in most respects was good, but in early spring many, in fact most, suffered illnesses. Now there began at first inflammations of the eyes, marked by rheum, pain, and unconcocted discharges. Small gummy sores in many cases causing distress when they broke out. The great majority relapsed and ceased late on the approach of autumn. In summer and autumn, dysenteric diseases, tenesmus and leontury, bilious diarrhea, with copious, thin, crude, smarting stools. In some cases, it was also watery. In many cases, there were also painful, bilious deflections, watery, full of thin particles, purulent and causing strangury. No kidney trouble, but their various symptoms succeeded in various orders. Vomitings of phlegm, bile, and undigested food. Ensues in all cases much moisture over all the body. These complaints in many cases were unattended with fever, and the sufferers were not confined to bed, but in many others there was fever, as I'm going to describe. Those who showed all the symptoms mentioned above were consumptives who suffered pain. When autumn came, and during winter, continuous fevers, in some few cases ardent, day fevers, night fevers, semi-tertians, quartans, irregular fevers. Each of the fevers mentioned found many victims, 6. Now the ardent fevers attacked the fewest persons, and these were less distressed than any of the others sick. There was no bleeding from the nose, except very slight discharges in a few cases, and no delirium. All the other symptoms were slight. The crises of these diseases were quite regular, generally in 17 days, counting the days of intermission, and I know of no ardent fever proving fatal at this time, nor of any phrenitis. The tertians were more numerous than the ardent fevers, and more painful. But all these had 4 regular periods from the first onset, had complete crises in 7, and in no case relapsed. But the quartans, while in many instances they began at first with quartan periodicity, yet in not a few they became quartan by an abscession from other fevers or illnesses. They were protracted, as quartans usually are, or even more protracted than usual. Many fell victims to quotidians, night fevers, or irregular fevers, and were ill for a long time, either in bed or walking about. In most of these cases, the fevers continued during the season of the Pleiades, or even until winter in many patients, especially children. There were convulsions and slight feverishness from the beginning. Sometimes, too, convulsions supervened upon fevers. Mostly these illnesses were protracted, but not dangerous, except for those who, from all other causes, were predisposed to die. The 7 which were altogether continuous and never intermitted at all. But in all cases grew worse after the manner of semi-tertians, with remission during one day, followed by exacerbation during the next, were the most severe of all the fevers which occurred at this time, the longest and the most painful. Beginning mildly, and on the whole increasing always with exacerbation and growing worse, they had slight remissions followed quickly after an abatement by or violent exacerbations, generally becoming worse on the critical days. All patients had irregular rigors that followed no fixed law, most rarely and least in the semi-tertians, but more violent in the other fevers. Copious sweats, least copious in the semi-tertians. They brought no relief, but on the contrary caused harm. These patients suffered great chill in the extremities, which grew warm again with difficulty. Generally, there was sleeplessness, especially with the semi-tertians, followed afterwards by coma. And all the bowels were disordered and in a bad state. But in the semi-tertians, they were far the worst. In most of them, urine either A, thin, crude, colorless, after a time becoming slightly concocted with signs of crisis, or 6, thick enough but turbid, in no way settling or forming sediment, or C, with small bad crude sediments, these being the worst of all. Coughs attended the fevers, but I cannot say that either harm or good resulted from the coughing on this occasion. Now the greatest number of these symptoms continued to be protracted, troublesome, very disordered, very irregular, and without any critical signs, both in the case of those who came very near death and in the case of those who did not. For even if some patients enjoyed slight intermissions, there followed a quick relapse. A few of them experienced a crisis, the earliest being about the 80th day, some of the latter having a relapse, so that most of them were still ill in the winter. The greatest number had no crisis before the disease terminated. These symptoms occurred in those who recovered just as much as in those who did not. The illnesses showed a marked absence of crisis in a great variety. The most striking and the worst symptom, which throughout attended the great majority, was a complete loss of appetite, especially in those whose general condition exhibited fatal signs. But in these fevers, they did not suffer much from unseasonable thirst. After long intervals, with many pains and with pernicious wasting, there supervened obsessions either too severe to be endured or too slight to be beneficial, so that there was a speedy return of the original symptoms and an aggravation of the mischief. The symptoms from which these patients suffered were dysenteries and tenesmus lares also, and fluxes also, either with or without these. Whenever any of these attacked violently, they were quickly fatal, or, if mild, they did no good. Slight eruptions, which did not match the extent of the diseases and quickly disappeared again, or swellings by the years that grew small, and signified nothing, in some cases appearing at the joints, especially the hip joint, in few instances leaving with signs of crisis, when they quickly re-established themselves in their original state. From all the diseases, some died, but the greatest number from these fevers, especially children, those just weaned older children of 8 or 10 years, and those approaching puberty. These victims never suffered from the latter symptoms without the first I have described above, but often the first without the latter. The only good sign, the most striking that occurred, which saved very many of those who were in the greatest danger, was when there was a change to strangury, into which obsessions took place. The strangury, too, came mostly to patients of the age as mentioned, though it did happen to many of the others, either without their taking a bed or when they were ill. Rapid and great was the complete change that occurred in their case. For the bowels, even if they were perniciously loose, quickly recovered. Their appetite for everything returned, and hereafter the fever abated. But the strangury, even in these cases, was long and painful. Their urine was copious, thick, varied, red, mixed with pus, and passed with pain. But they all survived, and I know of none of these that died. In all dangerous cases, you should be on the watch for all favorable cautions of the evacuations from all parts, or for fair and critical obsessions. Cautions signify nearness of crisis and sure recovery of health, but crude and unconcocted evacuations, which change into bad obsessions, denote absence of crisis, pain, prolonged illness, death, or a return of the same symptoms. But it is by a consideration of other signs that one must decide which of these results will be most likely. Declare the past, diagnose the present, foretell the future. Practice these acts. As to diseases, make a habit of 2 things to help, or at least to do no harm. The art has 3 factors: the disease, the patient, the physician. The physician is the servant of the art. The patient must cooperate with the physician in combating the disease. 12. Pains about the head and neck, and heaviness combined with pain, occur both without and with fever. Sufferers from phrenitis have convulsions, and eject verdigris-colored vomit. Some die very quickly. But in ardent and the other fevers, those with pain in the neck, heaviness of the temples, dimness of sight, and painless tension of the hypochondrium, bleed from the nose. Those with a general heaviness of the head, cardialgia and nausea, vomit afterwards bile and phlegm. Children, for the most part in such cases, suffer chiefly from the convulsions. Women have both these symptoms and pains in the womb. Older people, and those whose natural heat is failing, have paralysis or raving or blindness. Turor constitution 35. In Thasos, a little before, and at the season of Arcturus, many violent rains with northerly winds. About the equinox, until the setting of the Pleiades, slight southerly rains. Winter northerly, droughts, cold periods, violent winds, snow. About the equinox, very severe storms. Spring northerly, droughts, slight rains, periods of cold. About the summer solstice, slight showers, periods of great cold until near the dog star. After the dog star until Arcturus, hot summer. Graiety, heat, not intermittent, but continuous and severe. No rain fell. The Etesian winds blew. About Arcturus, southerly rains until the equinox the 14th. In this constitution, during winter, began paralyses, which attacked many, a few of whom quickly died. In fact, the disease was generally epidemic. In other respects, the public health continued good. Early in spring began ardent fevers, which continued until the equinox and on to summer. Now those who began to be ill at once, in spring or the beginning of summer, in most cases got well, though a few died. But when autumn and the rains came, the cases were dangerous, and more died. As to the peculiarities of the ardent fevers, the most likely patients to survive were those who had a proper and copious bleeding from the nose. In fact, I do not know of a single case in this constitution that proved fatal when a proper bleeding occurred, for Philiscus and Epaminondas and Silenus, who died, had only a slight epistaxis on the 4th and 5th days. Now the majority of the patients had rigors near the crisis, especially such as had no epistaxis, but these had sweats also as well as rigors, Kiti. Some had jaundice on the 6th day, but these were benefited by either a purging through the bladder or a disturbance of the bowels, or a copious hemorrhage, as was the case with Heraclides, who lay sick at the house of Aristides. This patient, however, who had a crisis on the 20th day, not only bled from the nose, but also experienced disturbance of the bowels and a purging through the bladder. Far otherwise was it with the servant of Phanagoras, who had none of these symptoms and died. But the great majority had hemorrhage, especially youths and those in the prime of life, and of these the great majority who had no hemorrhage died. Older people had jaundice or disordered bowels, for example, Bion, who lay sick at the house of Silenus. Dysenteries also were general in summer, and some too of those who had fallen ill and also suffered from hemorrhage. Finally had dysentery, for example, the slave of Erato and Milas, after copious hemorrhage, lapsed into dysentery. They recovered. This humor, then, especially was in great abundance, since even those who had no hemorrhage near the crisis, but swellings by the ears which disappeared. And after their disappearance, there was a heaviness along the left flank, up to the extremity of the hip, after the crisis had pain and passed thin urine, and then began to suffer slight hemorrhage about the 24th day, and obsessions into hemorrhage occurred. In the case of Antiphos, son of Critobulus, the illness ceased and came to a complete crisis about the 40th day. Though many women fell ill, they were fewer than the men and less frequently died. But the great majority had difficult childbirth, and after giving birth they would fall ill. And these especially died, as did the daughter of Telebulus on the 6th day after delivery. Now menstruation appeared during the fevers in most cases, and with many maidens it occurred then for the first time. Some bled from the nose. Sometimes both epistaxis and menstruation appeared together. For example, the maiden daughter of Datharus had her first menstruation during fever, and also a violent discharge from the nose. I know of no woman who died if any of these symptoms showed themselves properly, but all to my knowledge had abortions if they chanced to fall ill when with child. Urine in most cases was of good color, but thin, and with slight sediments, and the bowels of most were disordered with thin bilious excretions. I will mention cases in which was passed copious, watery, clear, and thin urine, even after a crisis in other respects favorable, and a favorable sediment, Bion, who lay sick at the house of Silenus Cratus, who lodged with Xenophanes, the slave of Areto and the wife of Mnesistratus. Afterwards all these suffered from dysentery. About the season of Arcturus, many had crisis on the 11th day, and these did not suffer even the normal relapses. There were also comatose fevers about this time, usually in children, and of all patients these showed the lowest mortality, CAT. About the equinox up to the setting of the Pleiades, and during winter, although the ardent fevers continued, yet cases of phrenitis were most frequent at this time, and most of them were fatal. In summer, too, a few cases had occurred. Now the sufferers from ardent fever, when fatal symptoms attended, showed signs at the beginning. For right from the beginning there was acute fever with slight rigors, sleeplessness, thirst, nausea, slight sweats about the forehead and collarbones. But in no case general, much delirium, fears, depression, very cold extremities, toes and hands, especially the latter. The exacerbations on the even days. But in most cases the pains were greatest on the 4th day, with sweat for the most part chilly, while the extremities could not now be warmed again, remaining livid and cold. And in these cases the thirst ceased. Their urine was scanty, black, thin, with constipation of the bowels. Nor was there hemorrhage from the nose in any case when these symptoms occurred, but only slight epistaxis. None of these cases suffered relapse, but they died on the 6th day with sweating. The cases of phrenitis had all the above symptoms, but the crises generally occurred on the 11th day. Some had their crises on the 20th day, namely those in whom the phrenitis did not begin at first, or began about the 3rd or 4th day. But though these fared tolerably at the beginning, yet the disease assumed an acute form about the 7th day. Now the number of illnesses was great, and of the patients there died chiefly striplings, young people, people in their prime, the smooth, the fair-skinned, the straight-haired, the black-haired, the black-eyed, the black-eyed. Those who had lied recklessly and carelessly, the thin-voiced, the rough, the lispers, the passionate. Women too died in very great numbers who were of this kind. In this constitution there were 4 symptoms, especially which denoted recovery: a proper hemorrhage through the nostrils, copious discharges by the bladder of urine with much sediment of a proper character, disordered bowels with bilious evacuations at the right time, the appearance of dysenteric characteristics. The crisis in many cases did not come with one only of the symptoms described above, but in most cases all symptoms were experienced, and the patients appeared to be more distressed, but all with these symptoms got well. Women and maidens experienced all the above symptoms, but besides, whenever any took place properly, and whenever copious menstruation supervened, there was a crisis therefrom which resulted in recovery. In fact, I know of no woman who died when any of these symptoms took place properly, for the daughter of Philo who died, though she had violent epistaxis, died rather unseasonably on the 7th day. In acute fevers, more especially in ardent fevers, when involuntary weeping occurs, epistaxis is to be expected, if the patient have no fatal symptoms besides. For when he is in a bad way, such weeping portends not hemorrhage, but death. The painful swellings by the ears in fevers, in some cases, neither subsided nor suppurated when the fever ceased with a crisis. They were cured by bilious diarrhea or dysentery, or a sediment of thick urine, such as closed the illness of Hermippus of Clazomene. The circumstances of the crises, from which too I formed my judgments, were either similar or dissimilar. For example, the 2 brothers who fell sick together at the same time, and lay ill near the bungalow of Epigenia. The elder of these had a crisis on the 6th day, the younger on the 7th. Both suffered a relapse together at the same time, with an intermission of 5 days. After the relapse, both had a complete crisis together on the 17th day. But the great majority had a crisis on the 6th day, with an intermission of 6 days, followed by a crisis on the 5th day after the relapse. Those who had a crisis on the 7th day had an intermission of 7 days, with a crisis on the 3rd day after the relapse. Others with a crisis on the 7th had an intermission of 3 days, with a crisis on the 7th day after the relapse. Some who had a crisis on the 6th day had an intermission of 6 and a relapse of 3, an intermission of 1 and a relapse of 1, followed by a crisis. For example, Euagon the son of Datharses. Others with a crisis on the 6th had an intermission of 7 days. And after the relapse, a crisis on the 4th, for example, the daughter of Aglaïdas. Now, most of those who fell ill in this constitution went through their illness in this manner, and none of those who recovered, so far as I know, failed to suffer the relapses which were normal in these cases, but all, so far, 5. No, recovered if their relapses took place after this fashion. Further, I know of none who suffered a fresh relapse after going through the illness in the manner described above. In these diseases most died on the 6th day, as did Epaminondas, Silenus, and Philiscus, the son of Antigoras. Those who had the swellings by the ears had a crisis on the 20th day, but these subsided in all cases without suppuration being diverted to the bladder. There were 2 cases of suppuration, both fatal, Cratystanax, who lived near the temple of Heracles, and the serving maid of Simnus the Fuller. When there was a crisis on the 7th day, with an intermission of 9 days followed by a relapse, there was a second crisis on the 4th day, after the relapse in the case of Panicles, for example, who lived by the temple of Dionysus. When there was a crisis on the 7th day, with an intermission of 6 days followed by a relapse, there was a second crisis on the 7th day, after the relapse in the case of Phenocrates, for example, who lay sick at the house of Nathon the Fuller, 22, during winter near the time of the winter solstice, and continuing until the equinox. The ardent fevers and the phrenitis still caused many deaths, but their crises changed. Most cases had a crisis on the 5th day from the outset, then intermitted 4 days, relapsed, had a crisis on the 5th day after the relapse, that is, after 13 days altogether. Mostly children experienced crises thus, but older people did so too. Some had a crisis on the 11th day, a relapse on the 14th, and a complete crisis on the 20th. But if rigor came on about the 20th day, the crisis came on the 40th. Most had rigors near the first crisis, and those who had rigors at first near the crisis had rigors again in the relapses at the time of the crisis. Fewest experienced rigors in the spring, more in summer, more still in autumn, but by far the most during winter. But the hemorrhages tended to cease. Dwindling were the circumstances attending the diseases, from which I framed my judgments, learning from the common nature of all, and the particular nature of the individual from the disease, the patient, the regimen prescribed, and the prescriber for these make a diagnosis more favorable or jest. From the constitution, both as a whole and with respect to the parts, of the weather and of each region, from the custom, mode of life, practices, and ages of each patient, from talk, manner, silence, thoughts, sleep, or absence of sleep, the nature and time of dreams, pluckings, scratchings, tears, from the exacerbations, stools, urine, sputa, vomit, the antecedents and consequence of each member in the successions of diseases and the obsessions to a fatal issue or a crisis, sweat. Rigor, chill, cough, sneezes, hiccoughs, breathing, belchings, flatulence, silent or noisy hemorrhoids. From these things must we consider what their consequence also will be. 24. Some fevers are continuous, some have an access during the day and an intermission during the night, or an access during the night and an intermission during the day. There are semitertians, tertians, quartans, quintans, septans, nonans. The most acute diseases, the most severe, difficult, and fatal, belong to the continuous fevers, the least fatal and least difficult of all. But the longest of all is the quartan. Not only is it such in itself, but it also ends other and serious diseases. In the fever called semitertian, which is more fatal than any other, there occur also acute diseases, while it especially precedes the illness of consumptives, and of those who suffer from other and longer diseases. The nocturnal is not very fatal, but it is long. The diurnal is longer still, and to some it also brings a tendency to consumption. The septon is long, but not fatal. The nonan is longer still, but not fatal. The exact tertian has a speedy crisis and is not fatal, but the quintan is the worst of all, for if it comes on before consumption or during consumption, the patient dies. Study side fever. Each of these fevers has its modes, its constitutions, and its exacerbations. For example, a continuous fever in some cases from the beginning is high and at its worst, leading up to the most severe stage, but about and at the crisis it moderates. In other cases, it begins gently and in suppressed manner, but rises and is exacerbated each day, bursting out violently near the crisis. In some cases, it begins mildly, but it increases and is exacerbated, reaching its height after a time. Then it declines again until the crisis or near the crisis. These characteristics may show themselves in any fever and in any disease. It is necessary also to consider the patient's mode of life and to take it into account when prescribing. Many other important symptoms there are which are akin to these, some of which I have described, while others I shall describe later. These must be duly weighed when considering and deciding who is suffering from one of these diseases in an acute fatal form, or whether the patient may recover who has a chronic fatal illness, or one from which he may recover. Who is to be prescribed for or not, what the prescription is to be, the quantity to be given, and the time to give it. When the exacerbations are on even days, the crises are on even days. But the diseases exacerbated on odd days have their crises on odd days. The first period of diseases with crises on the even days is the 4th day, then the 6th, 8th, 10th, 14th, 20th, 4th, 30th, 60th. Of those with a crisis on the odd days, the first period is the 3rd, then the 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th, 17th, 21st, 27th, 31st. Further, one must know that if the crises be on other days than the above, there will be relapses, and there may also be a fatal issue. So one must be attentive and know that at these times there will be the crises resulting in recovery or death or a tendency for better or worse. One must also consider in what periods the crises occur of irregular fevers, of quartans, of quintans, of septans, and of nonans. 14 cases case, Iphiliscus lived by the wall. He took to his bed with acute fever on the first day and sweating, not uncomfortable. Second day, general exacerbation, later a small clister moved the bowels well. A restful night. Third day. Early and until midday he appeared to have lost the fever, but towards evening acute fever with sweating, thirst, dry tongue, black urine, an uncomfortable night, without sleep, completely out of his mind. Fourth day. Ale symptoms exacerbated, black urine, a more comfortable night and urine of a better color. Fifth day. About midday, slight epistaxis of unmixed blood. Urine varied with scattered round particles suspended in it resembling semen. They did not settle on the application of a suppository. The patient passed with flatulent, scanty excreta. A distressing night, snatches of sleep, irrational talk, extremities everywhere cold, and would not get warm again. Black urine, snatches of sleep towards dawn. Speechless, cold sweat, extremities livid. About midday on the 6th day, the patient died. The breathing throughout, as though he were recollecting to do it, was rare and large. Spleen raised and a round swelling. Cold sweats all the time. The exacerbations on even days. Case 2, Silenus, lived on Broadway near the place of Eualcidas. After overexertion, drinking, and exercises at the wrong time, he was attacked by fever. He began by having pains in the loins, with heaviness in the head and tightness of the neck. From the bowels on the first day there passed copious discharges of bilious matter, unmixed, frothy, and highly colored. Urine black with a black sediment. Thirst, tongue dry, no sleep at night, second day. Acute fever, stools more copious, thinner, frothy. Urine black, uncomfortable night, slightly out of his mind, third day. General exacerbation. Oblong tightness of the hypochondrium, soft underneath, extending on both sides to the navel. Stools thin, blackish. Urine turbid, blackish. No sleep at night. Much rambling, laughter. Singing, no power of restraining himself. Fourth day. Same symptoms. Fifth day. Stools unmixed, bilious, smooth, greasy, urine thin, transparent, lucid intervals. Sixth day. Slight sweats about the head, extremities cold and livid, much tossing. Nothing passed from the bowels. Urine suppressed. Acute fever. 7th day, speechless. Extremities would no longer get warm. No urine. 8th day, cold sweat all over. Red spots with sweat, round, small, like acne, which persisted without subsiding. From the bowels, with slight stimulus, there came a copious discharge of solid stools, thin as it were unconcocted, painful. Urine painful and irritating. Extremities grow a little warmer, fitful sleep, coma, speechlessness, thin, transparent urine. 9th day. Same symptoms, 10th day. Took no drink, coma, fitful sleep. Discharges from the bowels similar. Had a copious discharge of thickish urine, which on standing left a farinaceous white deposit. Extremities again cold. 11th day. Death. From the beginning, the breath in this case was throughout rare and large. Continuous throbbing of the hypochondrium, age about 20 years. Case Hierophant had acute fever. Scanty stools with tenesmus at the beginning, afterwards becoming thin, bilious, and fairly frequent. No sleep, urine black and thin. 5th day. Deafness early in the day, general exacerbation, spleen swollen, tension of the hypochondrium, scanty black stools, delirium. 6th day, wandering talk. At night, sweat and chill. The wandering persisted. Chill all over, thirst, out of his mind. During the night, he was rational and slept. 8th day, fever, spleen lessened, quite rational. Pain at first in the groin on the side of the spleen, then the pains extended to both legs. Night comfortable, urine of a better color with a slight deposit. 10th day, sweat, crisis, intermission. E.g. on the 5th day after the crisis, the patient relapsed. Immediately the spleen swelled, acute fever, return of deafness. On the 3rd day after the relapse, the spleen grew less and the deafness diminished, but there was pain in the legs. During the night, he sweated. The crisis was about the 17th day. There was no delirium during the relapse. Case 4, Thassos, the wife of Philinus, gave birth to a daughter. The lochial discharge was normal, and the mother was doing well, when on the 14th day after delivery, she was seized with fever, attended with rigor. At first she suffered in the stomach and the right hypochondrium. Pains in the genital organs. The discharge ceased. By a pessary these troubles were eased, but pains persisted in the head, neck, and loins. No sleep, extremities cold, thirst, bowels burnt, scanty stools, urine thin, and at first colorless. 12th day. Much delirium at night, followed by recovery of reason. 7th day, thirst, stools scanty, bilious, highly colored. 8th day, rigor, acute fever, many painful convulsions, much delirium. The application of a suppository made her keep going to stool, and there were copious motions with a bilious flux. No sleep. 9th day, convulsions. 10th day, lucid intervals. 11th day, slept. Complete recovery of her memory, followed quickly by renewed delirium. A copious passing of urine with convulsions, her attendants seldom reminding her which was white and thick, like urine with a sediment, and then shaken. It stood for a long time without forming a sediment, color and consistency like that of the urine of cattle. Such was the nature of the urine that I myself saw. About the 14th day there were twitchings over all the body, much wandering with lucid intervals followed quickly by renewed delirium. About the 17th day she became speechless. 20th day. Death. Case V, the wife of Hippocrates, who lay sick near the founder, when near her delivery, was seized with severe rigor without. It was said, becoming warm, and the same symptoms occur on the following day. On the 3rd day she gave birth to a daughter, and the delivery was in every respect normal. On the 2nd day after the delivery she was seized with acute fever, pain at the stomach and in the genitals. A pessary relieved these symptoms, but there was pain in the head, neck, and loins. No sleep. From the bowels passed scanty stools, bilious, thin, and unmixed. Urine, thin and blackish. Delirium on the night of the 6th day from the day the fever began. 7th day, all symptoms exacerbated. Sleeplessness, delirium, thirst, bilious, highly colored stools. 8th day, rigor, more sleep. 9th day, the same symptoms. 10th day, severe pains in the legs, pain again at the stomach. Heaviness in the head, no delirium, more sleep. Constipation. 11th day, urine a better color, with a thick deposit. Was easier 14th day, rigor, acute fever 15th day. Vomited fairly frequently, bilious yellow vomit. Sweated without fever. At night, however, acute fever, urine thick with a white sediment. 18th day, exacerbation, an uncomfortable night, no sleep, delirium, 18th day. Thirst, tongue parched, no sleep, much delirium, pain in the legs. About the 20th day, slight rigors in the early morning, coma, quiet sleep, scanty, bilious, black vomits, deafness at night. About the 21st day, heaviness all over the left side with pain, slight coughing, urine thick, turbid, reddish, no sediment on standing. In other respects easier, no fever. From the beginning she had pain in the throat, redness, uvula drawn back. Throughout there persisted an acrid flux, smarting and salt. About the 27th day, no fever, sediment in urine, some pain in the side. About the 31st day. Attacked by fever, bowels disordered and bilious, 40th day. Scanty bilious vomits, 80th day. Complete crisis with cessation otifer. Case 6, Cleonatides, who lay sick above the temple of Heracles, was seized by an irregular fever. He had at the beginning pains in the head and the left side, and in the other parts pains like those caused by fatigue. The exacerbations of the fever were varied and irregular. Sometimes there were sweats, sometimes there were not. Generally, the exacerbations manifested themselves most on the critical days. About the 24th day, pain in the hands, bilious, yellow vomits, fairly frequent, becoming after a while like verdigris, general relief. About the 30th day, epistaxis from both nostrils began and continued irregular and slight until the crisis. All the time he suffered no thirst, nor lack of appetite or sleep. Urine thin and not colorless about the 40th day. Urine reddish and with an abundant red deposit. Was eased. Afterwards the urine varied, sometimes having, sometimes not having a sediment. 60th day. Urine had an abundant sediment, white and smooth. General improvement. Fever intermitted. Urine again thin but of good color. 70th day. Fever which intermitted for 10 days. 80th day. Rigor. Attacked by acute fever, much sweat. In the urine a red, smooth sediment. A complete crisis. Case 7, Metten was seized with fever and painful heaviness in the loins. 2nd day. After a fairly copious draught of water, had his bowels well moved. 3rd day. Ahitis in the head, stools thin, bilious, rather red. 4th day. General exacerbation. Slight epistaxis twice from the right nostril. An uncomfortable night. Stools as on the 3rd day. Urine rather black, had a rather black cloud floating in it, spread out, which did not settle. 5th day, violent epistaxis of unmixed blood from the left nostril, sweat, crisis. After the crisis, sleeplessness, wandering, urine thin and rather black. His head was bathed, sleep, reason restored. The patient suffered no relapse, but after the crisis bled several times from the nose. Case 8, Erasinus, lived by the gully of Bodtes, was seized with fever after supper. A troubled night. 1st day, quiet, but the night was painful. 2nd day, general exacerbation, delirium at night. 3rd day, pain and much delirium. 4th day, very uncomfortable, no sleep at night, dreams and wandering, then worse symptoms of a striking and significant character, fear and discomfort. 5th day, early in the morning was composed and in complete possession of his senses. But long before midday was madly delirious, could not restrain himself, extremities cold and rather livid, urine suppressed, died about sunset. In this patient the fever was throughout accompanied by sweat. The hypochondria were swollen, distended, and painful. Urine black with round suspended particles which did not settle. There were solid discharges from the bowels. Thirst throughout not very great. Many convulsions with sweating about the time of death, case Lines Crito in Thassos. While walking about, was seized with a violent pain in the Greto. He took to bed the same day with shivering and nausea. Regained a little warmth. At night was delirious. 2nd day, swelling of the whole foot, which was rather red about the ankle and distended, black blisters, acute fever, bad delirium. Alvine discharges unmixed, bilious and rather frequent. He died on the second day from the commencement. Case the man of Clazomina who lay sick by the well of Phrynichides was seized with fever. Pain at the beginning in head, neck, and loins, followed immediately by deafness. No sleep, seized with acute fever. Hypochondrium swollen, but not very much. Dissension, tongue dry, 4th day. Delirium at night. 5th day. Painful, estivith day. All symptoms exacerbated. About the 11th day, slight improvement. From the beginning to the 14th day, there were from the bowels thin discharges, copious of a watery biliousness. They were well supported by the patient. Then the bowels were constipated, urine throughout thin, but of good color. It had much cloud spread through it, which did not settle in a sediment. About the 16th day, the urine was a little thicker and had a slight sediment. The patient became a little easier and was more rational. 17th day, urine thin again, painful swellings by both ears, no sleep, wandering, pain in the legs. 20th day, a crisis left the patient free from fever, no sweating, quite rational. About the 27th day, violent pain in the right hip, which quickly ceased. The swellings by the ears neither subsided nor suppurated, but continued painful. About the 31st day, diarrhea with copious, watery discharges and signs of dysentery. Urine thick, the swellings by the ears subsided. 40th day, pain in the right eye, sight rather impaired, recovery. Case of one, the wife of Dromedes, after giving birth to a daughter, when everything had gone normally. On the 2nd day, was seized with rigor, acute fever. On the 1st day, she began to feel pain in the region of the hypochondrium, nausea, shivering, restless, and on the following days did not sleep. Respiration rare large interrupted at once as by an inspiration. 2nd day from rigor healthy action of the bowels. Urine thick, white, turbid like urine which is settled. Stood a long time and then been stirred up. It did not settle. No sleep at night. 3rd day. At about midday rigor acute fever. Urine similar. Pain in the hypochondrium. Nausea. An uncomfortable night without sleep. A cold sweat all over the body, but the patient quickly recovered heat. 4th day. Slight relief of the pains about the hypochondrium, painful heaviness of the head, somewhat comatose, slight epistaxis, tongue dry, thirst, scanty urine, thin and oily, snatches of sleep. 5th day. Thirst, nausea, urine similar, no movement of the bowels. About midday, much delirium, followed quickly by lucid intervals. Rose but grew somewhat comatose, like chilliness, supped at night. Was delirious. 6th day. In the morning had a rigor. Quickly recovered heat. Sweated all over. Extremities cold. Was delirious. Respiration large and rare. After a while convulsions began from the head, quickly followed by death. Case 12. A man dined when hot and drank too much. During the night he vomited everything. Acute fever, pain in the right hypochondrium, inflammation, soft underneath from the inner part. An uncomfortable night you are in, at the first thick and red. On standing, it did not settle. Tongue dry, no great thirst. 4th day, acute fever, pains all over. 5th day, passed much smooth, oily urine, acute fever. 6th day, in the afternoon, much delirium. No sleep at night. 7th day. General exacerbation. Urine similar. Much rambling. Could not restrain himself. On stimulation, the bowels pass watery, disturbed discharges with worms. An uncomfortable night with rigor in the morning. Acute fever. Hot sweat, and the patient seemed to lose his fever. Little sleep followed by chilliness, expectoration. In the evening, much delirium, and shortly afterwards he vomited black, scanty, bilious vomits. 10th day, legs painful, general exacerbation, wandering. 11th day, death. Crises not a woman lying sick by the shore who was 3 months gone with child, was seized with fever, and immediately began to feel pains in the loins. 3rd day. Pain in the neck and in the head and in the region of the right collarbone. Quickly she lost her power of speech. The right arm was paralyzed with a convulsion after the manner of a stroke, completely delirious. An uncomfortable night without sleep, bowels disordered with bilious, unmixed, scanty stools. 4th day. Her speech was recovered, but was indistinct. Convulsions, pains of the same H parts remained. painful swelling in the hypochondrium, no sleep, utter delirium, bowels disordered, urine thin and not of good color, 5th day. Acute fever, pain in the hypochondrium, utter delirium, bilious stools. At night sweated, was without fever, 6th day. Rational general relief, but pain remained about the left collarbone, thirst, urine thin, no sleep. 7th day. Trembling, some coma, slight delirium, pains in the region of the collarbone and left upper arm remained. Other symptoms relieved, quite rational. For 3 days there was an intermission of fever. 11th day, relapse, rigor, attack of fever. But about the 14th day, the patient vomited bilious yellow matter fairly frequently. Sweated. A crisis took off the fever. Case Sortoid Melidia, who lay sick by the temple of Hera, began to suffer violent pain in the head, neck, and chest. Immediately she was attacked by acute fever, and there followed a slight menstrual flow. There were continuous pains in all these parts. 6th day, coma, nausea, shivering, flushed cheeks, slight delirium. 7th day, sweat, intermittence of fever, the pains persisted. Relapse, snatches of sleep, urine throughout a good color but thin, stools thin, bilious, irritating, scanty, black, and of bad odor, sediment in the urine white and smooth, sweating. 11th day, perfect crisis, epidemics. Casei Pythian, who lived by the temple of earth, was seized with trembling, which began in the hands. 1st day, acute fever, wandering. 2nd day, general exacerbation. 3rd day, same symptoms. 4th day, stool scanty, uncompounded, and bilious. 5th day, general exacerbation, fitful sleep, constipation. 6th day, very reddish sputa. 7th day, mouth drawn awry. 8th day, general exacerbation, tremblings persisted, urine from the beginning to the 8th day, thin, colorless, with a cloudy substance floating. Emit 10th day, sweat, sputa somewhat concocted, crisis, urine somewhat thin about the time of the crisis. After the crisis, 40 days subsequent to IT, abscess in the seat, and an abscession through strangury. Case 2, Hermocrates, who lay sick by the new wall, was seized with fever. He began to feel pain in the head and loins, tension of the hypochondrium without swelling, tongue at the beginning parched, deafness at once, no sleep, no great thirst, urine thick red with no sediment on standing, stools not scanty, and burnt. 5th day, urine thin, with particles floating in it without sediment. At night, delirium. 6th day, jaundice, general exacerbation, not rational. 7th day, discomfort, urine thin, and as before, the following days similar. About the 11th day, there seemed to be general relief. Coma began. Urine thicker, reddish, thin, at the bottom, without sediment. By degrees grew more rational. 14th day, no fever, no sweat, sleep, reason quite recovered. Urine as before. About the 17th day, there was a relapse, and the patient grew hot. On the following days, there was acute fever, urine thin, delirium. 20th day, a fresh crisis, no fever, no sweat. All the time, the patient had no appetite, was perfectly collected, but could not talk. Tongue dry, AO thirst, snatches of sleep, coma. About the 24th day, he grew hot, bowels loose with copious, thin discharges. On the following days, acute fever, tongue parched. 27th day, death. In this case, deafness persisted throughout, urine thick, red, without settling, or thin, colorless, with substances floating in it. The patient had no power to take food. Case 3, the man lying sick in the Garden of Delirices had for a long time heaviness in the head and pain in the right temple. From some exciting cause, he was seized with fever and took to his bed. 2nd day. Slight flow of unmixed blood from the left nostril. The bowels were well moved, urine thin and varied, with particles in small groups like barley meal or semen floating in it. 3rd day. Acute fever, stools black, thin, frothy, with a livid sediment in them. Slight stupor, getting up caused distress. In the urine, a livid, rather viscous sediment. 4th day. Vomited scanty, bilious yellow vomits, and after a short interval, verdigris colored ones. Slight flow of unmixed blood from the left nostril. Stools unaltered and urine unaltered. Sweat about the head and collarbones. Spleen enlarged. Pain in the direction of the thigh. Tension soft underneath of the right hypochondrium. No sleep at night. Slight delirium. 5th day. Stools more copious. Black, frothy, black sediment in the stools. No sleep at agit delirium. 6th day. Stools black, oily, viscid, foul-smelling. Slept, was more rational. 7th day. Tongue dry, thirsty, no sleep, delirium. Urine thin, not of a good color. 8th day, stools black, scanty, compact, sleep was collected, not very thirsty. 9th day. Rigor, acute fever, sweat, chill, delirium, squinting of the right eye, tongue dry, thirsty, sleepless. 10th day, symptoms about the same. 11th day, quite rational, no fever, slept, urine thin about the time of the crisis. The patient remained free from fever for 2 days, relapsed on the 14th day, and immediately had no sleep at night and was completely delirious. Urine muddy, like that which has been stirred up after settling. Acute fever, completely delirious, no sleep, pain in knees and legs. On the application of a suppository, black, solid motions were passed. 16th day. Urine thin with a cloudy substance floating in it. Delirium, 17th day, extremities cold in the early morning, would wrap himself up. Acute fever, sweated all over, was relieved, more rational, some fever. Thirst, vomited bilious matters. Yellow and scanty, solid motions from the bowels. After a while they became black, scanty and thin. Urine thin and not of a good color. 16th day. Was not rational, comatose. 19th day. The same symptoms. 20th day. Slept, completely rational, sweated, no fever, no thirst, urine thin. 21st day, slightly delirious, rather thirsty, pain in the hypochondrium and throbbing about the navel continuously. 25th. Sediment in urine, completely rational. 27th day. Pain in the right hip, but in other respects very comfortable. Sediment in the urine. About the 29th day, pain in the right eye, urine thin. 40th day. Past motions full of flame, white, and rather frequent. Copious sweat all over. A perfect crisis. Case on Eva Felistes and Thassos had for a long time pain in the head, and at last fell into a state of stupor and took to his bed. Heavy drinking having caused continuous fevers, the pain grew worse. At night he grew hot at the first day. Vomited bilious matter scanty, at first yellow, afterwards increasing, and of the color of verdigris. Solid motions from the bowels, an uncomfortable night. 2nd day, deafness, acute fever, tension of the right hypochondrium, which fell inward. Urine thin, transparent, with a small quantity of substance, like semen, floating in it. About midday became raving. 3rd day. Uncomfortable. 4th day, convulsions, exacerbation. 5th day, died early in the morning. Case V. Chirion, who lay sick in the house of Demaenus, was seized with fever after drinking. At once there was painful heaviness of the head, no sleep. Bowels disturbed with thin, rather bilious stools. 3rd day. Acute fever, trembling of the head, particularly of the lower lip. After a while, rigor, convulsions, complete delirium. An uncomfortable night. 4th day, quiet. Snatches of sleep, wandering. 5th day. Pain, general exacerbation, irrational talk. Uncomfortable night, no sleep. 6th day, the same symptoms. 7th day, rigor, acute fever. Sweating all over, crisis. This patient's stools were throughout, bilious, scanty, and uncompounded. Urine thin, not of a good color, with a cloudy substance floating in it. About the 8th day, the urine had a better color, with a slight white sediment. Quite ratio-nale, and no fever. Intermission. 9th day, relapse. About the 14th day, acute fever. 16th day, vomited bilious yellow matters rather frequently. 17th day, rigor, acute fever, sweating crisis, ended the fever. Urine after relapse and crisis of a good color with a sediment, no delirium during the relapse. 18th day, slight heat, rather thirsty. Urine thin with cloudy substance floating in it, slight delirium. 19th day. No fever, pain in the neck, sediment in urine. 20th day, complete crisis. Castix, the maiden daughter of Euryanyx, was seized with fever. Throughout the illness, she suffered no thirst and had no inclination for food. Slight alvine discharges, urine thin, scanty, and not of a good color. At the beginning of the fever, suffered pain in the seat. On the 6th day, did not sweat, being without fever, a crisis. The sore near the seat suppurated slightly, and burst at the crisis. After the crisis, on the 7th day, she had a rigor, grew slightly hot, sweated. Afterwards, the extremities always cold. About the 10th day, after the sweating that occurred, she grew delirious, but was soon rational again. They said that the trouble was due to eating grapes. After an intermission on the 12th day, she again wandered a great deal. The bowels were disturbed with bilious, uncompounded, scanty, thin, irritating stools, which frequently made her get up. She died the 7th day from the second attack of delirium. This patient, at the beginning of the illness, had pain in the throat, which was red throughout. The uvula was drawn back, many fluxes scanty and acrid. She had a cough with signs of coction, but brought up nothing, no appetite for any food the whole time, nor did she desire anything. No thirst, and she drank nothing worth mentioning. She was silent and did not converse at all. Depression, the patient despairing of herself. There was also some inherited tendency to consumption. Caspar VII, the woman suffering from angina, who lay sick in the house of Ariston, began her complaint with indistinctness of speech. Tongue red and grew parched. 1st day, shivered and grew hot. 3rd day. Rigor, acute fever, a reddish, hard swelling in the neck, extending to the breast on either side. Extremities cold and livid, breathing elevated, drink returned through the nostrils. She could not swallow stools, and urine ceased. 4th day, general exacerbation. 5th day, death. Case 8, the youth who lay sick by the Liar's Market, was seized with fever after unaccustomed fatigue, toil, and running. 1st day, bowels disturbed with bilious, thin, copious stools, urine thin and blackish, no sleep, thirst. 2nd day, general exacerbation, stools more copious and more unfavorable, no sleep, mind disordered, slight sweating. 3rd day, uncomfortable, thirst, nausea, much tossing, distress, delirium, extremities livid and cold, tension soft underneath of the hypochondrium, 2 on both sides. 4th day, no sleep, grew worse. 7th day, died, being about 20 years old. Case the woman who lodged with Tizimeus was in bed with a troublesome attack of inflammation of the upper bowel, copious vomits, could not retain her drink, pains in the region of the hypochondria. The pains were also lower in the region of the bowels. Constant tormina. No thirst. She grew hot, though the extremities were cold all the time. Nausea. Sleeplessness. Urine scanty and thin. Excreta crude, thin, and scanty. It was no longer possible to do her any good, and she died. Case X, a woman who was one of the house of pantomimes after a miscarriage, was seized with fever on the 1st day. Tongue dry, thirst, nausea, sleeplessness. Bowels disordered with thin, copious, and crude stools. 2nd day, rigor, acute fever, copious stools, no sleep. 3rd day, the pains greater. 4th day, delirium. 7th day, death. The bowels were throughout loose, with copious, thin, crude stools, urine scanty and thin. Case Swift, another woman, after a miscarriage about the 5th month, the wife of Hippocrates, was seized with fever. At the beginning, she had alternations of coma and sleeplessness, pain in the loins, heaviness in the head. 2nd day, bowels disordered with scanty, thin stools, which at first were uncompounded. 3rd day, stools more copious and worse. No sleep at night. 4th day, delirium, fears, depression. Squinting of the right eye, slight cold sweat about the head, extremities cold. 5th day, general exacerbation, much wandering with rapid recovery of reason, no thirst, no sleep, stools copious and unfavorable throughout, urine scanty, thin, and blackish, extremities cold and rather livid. 6th day, same symptoms. 7th day, death. Case 12, a woman who lay sick by the Liar's Market after giving birth in a first and painful delivery to a male child, was seized with fever. From the very first there was thirst, nausea, slight pain at the stomach, dry tongue, bowels disordered with thin and scanty discharges, no sleep. Second day, slight rigor, acute fever, slight cold sweating around the head. Third day, in pain, crude, thin, copious discharges from the bowels. Fourth day, rigor, general exacerbation, sleepless. Fifth day, GI pain. Sixth day, the same symptoms, copious fluid discharges from the bowels. Seventh day, rigor, acute fever, thirst, much tossing, towards evening cold sweat all over, chill, extremities cold and would not be warmed. At night she again had a rigor, the extremities would not be warmed. No sleep, slight delirium, but quickly was rational again. Eighth day, about midday, recovered her heat. Thirst, coma, nausea, vomited, bilious, scanty, yellowish matters. An uncomfortable night, no sleep. Unconsciously passed a copious discharge of urine. Ninth day, general abatement of the symptoms. Coma. Towards evening, slight rigor. Vomited scanty, bilious matters. 10th day. Rigor, exacerbation of the fever. No sleep whatsoever. In the early morning, a copious discharge of urine. W without sediment. Extremities were warmed. 11th day. Vomited bilious matters of the color of verdigris. A rigor shortly afterwards, and the extremities became cold again. In the evening, sweat, rigor, and copious vomiting. A painful night. 12th day, vomited, copious, black, fetid matters, much hiccoughing, painful thirst. 13th day, vomited, black, fetid, copious matters, rigor. About midday, lost her speech. 14th day, epistaxis, death. The bowels of this patient were throughout loose, and there were shivering fits, age about 17, constitution too. The year was southerly and rainy, with no winds throughout. About the rising of Arcturus, while during the immediately preceding period droughts had prevailed, there were now heavy rains, with southerly winds. Autumn dark and cloudy, with abundance of rain. The winter southerly, humid, and mild after the solstice. Long after the solstice, near the equinox, wintry weather returned, and at the actual equinoctial period there were northerly winds with snow, but not for long. The spring southerly again, with no winds, many rains throughout until the dog star. The summer was clear and warm, with waves of stifling heat. The Etesian winds waxed faint and intermittent, but on the other hand, near the rising of Arcturus, there were heavy rains with northerly winds. The year having proved southerly, wet and mild, in the winter the general health was good, except for the consumptives, who will be described in due course. Early in the spring, at the same time as the cold snaps which occurred, were many malignant cases of erysipelas, some from a known exciting cause, and some not. Many died, and many suffered pain in the throat, voices impaired, ardent fevers, rhinitis, aphthay in the mouth, tumors in the private parts, inflammations of the eyes, carbuncles, disordered bowels, loss of appetite, thirst in some cases, though not in all, urine disordered, copious bad, long coma alternating with sleeplessness, absence of crisis in many cases, and obscure crises, dropsies, many consumptives. Such were the diseases epidemic. There were patients suffering from each of the above types, and fatal cases were many. The symptoms in each type were as follow. Offward than many were attacked by the erysipelas all over the body, when the exciting cause was a trivial accident or a very small wound. Especially when the patients were about 60 years old, and the wound was in the head, however little the neglect might have been. Many, even while undergoing treatment, suffered from severe inflammations, too, and the erysipelas would quickly spread widely in all directions. Most of the patients experienced obsessions ending in suppurations. Flesh, sinews, and bones slight the neglect. And even when a patient was actually undergoing treatment, there were severe inflammations, etc. fell away in large quantities. The flux which formed was not like pus, but was a different sort of putrefaction with a copious and varied flux. If any of these symptoms occurred in the head, there was loss of hair from all the head and from the chin. The bones were bared and fell away, and there were copious fluxes. Fever was sometimes present, and sometimes absent. These symptoms were terrifying rather than dangerous, for whenever they resulted in suppuration or some similar coction, the cases usually recovered. But whenever the inflammation and the erysi appeared without producing any such obsession, there were many deaths. The course of the disease was the same to whatever part of the body it spread. Many lost the arm and the entire forearm. If the malady settled in the sides, there was rotting either before or behind. In some cases, the entire thigh was bared, or the shin, and the entire foot. But the most dangerous of all such cases were when the pubes and genital organs were attacked. Such were the sores which sprang from an exciting cause. In many cases, however, sores occurred in fevers before a fever or supervening on fevers. In some of these also, when an abscession took place through suppuration, or when a seasonable disturbance of the bowels occurred or a passing of favorable urine, this gave rise to a solution. But when none of these events happened and the symptoms disappeared without a sign, death resulted. It was in the spring that by far the greater number of cases of erysipelas occurred, but they continued throughout the summer, and during autumn, much trouble was caused to some patients by the tumors in the throat, inflammations of the tongue, and the abscesses about the teeth. Many had the symptom of impaired and mood voice at first at the beginning of the cases of consumption, but also in the ardent fevers and in phrenitis. 6 died now. The ardent fevers and phrenitis began early in the spring after the cold snaps which occurred, and very many fell sick at that time. These suffered acute and fatal symptoms. The constitution of the ardent fevers that occurred was as follows. At the beginning, coma, nausea, shivering, acute fever, no great thirst, no delirium, slight epistaxis. The exacerbations in most cases on even days, and at the time of the exacerbations, there was loss of memory with prostration and speechlessness. The feet and hands of these patients were always colder than usual, most especially about the times of exacerbation. Slowly and in no healthy manner, they recovered their heat, becoming rational again and conversing. Either the coma held them continuously without sleep, or they were wakeful and in pain. Bowels disordered in the majority of these cases, with crude, thin, copious stools. Urine copious, thin, with no critical or favorable sign, nor did any other critical sign appear in these patients, for there occurred neither favorable hemorrhage nor any other of the usual critical obsessions. The manner of their dying varied with the individual. It was usually irregular at the crises, but in some cases after long loss of speech and many with sweating. These were the symptoms attending the fatal cases of ardent fever, and the cases of phrenitis are similar. These suffered from no thirst at all, and no case showed the mad delirium that attacked others, but they passed away overpowered by a dull oppression of stupor. 7. There were other fevers also, which I shall describe in due course. Many had aphythae and sores in the mouth. Flexes about the genitals were copious. Sores, tumors, external and internal. The swellings which appear in the groin, watery inflammations of the eyes, chronic and painful. Grows on the eyelids, external and internal, in many cases destroying the sight, which are called figs. There were also often growths on other sores, particularly in the genitals. Many carbuncles in the summer, and other affections called large pustules. Many had large tetters. In the first place, many were attacked by painful tenesmus. Mostly children, all in fact, who were approaching puberty, and most of these died. Many lienteries. Cases of dysentery, but they too were not very painful. Stools bilious, greasy, thin, and watery. In many eases, this condition of the bowels constituted the disease itself, fever being sometimes absent and sometimes present, painful tormenta, and malignant colic. There were evacuations, though the bulk of the contents remained behind. The evacuations did not take away the pains, and yielded with difficulty to the remedies administered. Purgings, in fact, did harm in most cases. Of those in this condition, many died rapidly, though a few held out longer. In brief, all patients, whether the disease was prolonged or acute, died chiefly from the bowel complaints, for the bowels carried all off together. Loss of appetite, to a degree that I never met before, attended all the cases described above, but most especially the last, and of them and of the others also, especially such as were fatally stricken, did not clear the trouble from the bowel. Now, if be taken with, the only possible translation is evacuations of the many contents which were retained there, implying complete evacuation. Galen's comment, Kinesthetin, Part P. 7. bears out the former interpretation. Thirst afflicted some, but not others. Of the fever patients, as well as of the other cases, none were unseasonably affected, but as far as drink was concerned, you could diet them as you pleased. X. The urine that was passed was copious, not in proportion to, but far exceeding, the drink administered. Yet the urine, too, that was passed showed a great malignancy, for it had neither the proper consistency, nor coction, nor cleansing powers. It signified for most patients wasting, trouble, pains, and absence of crisis, chouette but heat. Coma attended mostly the phrenitis and ardent fevers, without excluding, however, all the other diseases of the most severe sort that were accompanied by fever. Most patients throughout either were sunk in heavy coma, or slept only in fitful snatches, while many other forms also of fever were epidemic. Tertians, quartans, night fevers, fevers continuous, protracted, irregular fevers, attended with nausea, fevers of no definite character. All these cases suffered severely from trouble, for the bowels in most cases were disordered, with shivering fits. Sweats portended no crisis, and the character of the urine was, as I have described. Most of these cases were protracted, for the abscessions too which took place did not prove critical as in other cases. Nay, rather, in all cases, all symptoms marked obscurity of crisis, or absence of crisis, or protraction of the disease. But most especially in the patients last described. A few, see the preceding note, all 9 of these had a crisis about the 80th day. With most recovery followed no rule. A few of them died of dropsy without taking to their bed. Many sufferers from the other diseases, too, were troubled with swellings, most particularly the consumptives. 13. The severest and most troublesome disease, as well as the most fatal, was the consumption. Many cases began in the winter, and of these several took to their bed, though some went about ailing without doing so. Early in the spring, most of those who had gone to bed died, while none of the others lost their cough, though it became easier in the summer. During autumn, all took to bed, and many died. Most of these were ill for a long time. Now, most of these began suddenly to grow worse, showing the following symptoms: frequent shivering, often continuous and acute fever, unseasonable, copious cold sweats throughout, great chill with difficult recovery of heat, bowels variously constipated, then quickly relaxing, and violently relaxing in all cases near the end, the humors about the lungs spread downwards, abundance of unfavorable urine, malignant wasting. The coughs throughout were frequent, bringing up copious, concocted, and liquid sputa, but without much pain. But even if there was pain, in all cases the purging from the lungs took place very mildly. The throat did not smart very much, nor did salt humors cause any distress at all. The fluxes, however, viscid, white, moist, frothy, which came from the head, were abundant. But by far the worst symptom that attended both these cases and the others was the distaste for food, as has been mentioned. They had no relish either for drink with nourishment, but they remained entirely without thirst. Heaviness in the body. In most of them there was swelling, which developed into dropsy, shivering fits, and delirium near death. 14. The physical characteristics of the consumptives were skin smooth, whitish, bright eyes, a leukophlegmatic condition, shoulder blades projecting like wings, women too so. As to those with a melancholic, or rather sanguine too complexion, they were attacked by ardent fevers, phrenitis, and dysenteric troubles. Tenesmus affected own phlegmatic people. The chronic diarrhea and acrid greasy stools affected persons of a bilious temperament. In all the cases described, spring was the worst enemy, and caused the most deaths. Summer was the most favorable season, in which fewest died. In autumn, and during the season of the Pleiades, on the other hand, there were again deaths, usually on the 4th day, and it seems to me natural that the coming on of summer should have been helpful. For the coming on of winter resolves the diseases of summer, and the coming on of summer removes those of winter. And yet, in itself, the summer in question was not healthful. In fact, it was suddenly hot, southerly and calm. But nevertheless, the change from the other constitution proved beneficial. Substeins the power, too, to study correctly what has been written, I consider to be an important part of the art of medicine. The man who has learnt these things and uses them will not, I think, make great mistakes in the art. And it is necessary to learn accurately each constitution of the seasons as well as the disease. What common element in the constitution or in the disease is good, and what common element in the constitution or in the disease is bad? What malady is protracted and fatal? What is protracted and likely to end in recovery? What acute illness is fatal? What acute illness is likely to end in recovery? With this knowledge, it is easy to examine the order of the critical days and to prognosticate therefrom. One who has knowledge of these matters can know whom he ought to treat, as well as the time and method of treatment. 16 cases case, in Thasos, the Parian who lay sick beyond the temple of Artemis was seized with acute fever, which at the beginning was continuous and ardent. Thirst. At the beginning coma, followed by sleeplessness. Bowels disordered at the beginning, urine thin. Stex day. Oily urine, delirium. 7th day. General exacerbation, no sleep. Urine similar and mind disordered. Stools bilious and fatty. 8th day, slight epistaxis. Vomited scanty matters of the color of verdigris. Snatches of sleep. 9th day. Same symptoms. 10th day. General improvement. 11th day. Sweated all over, grew chilly, but quickly recovered heat. 14th day. Acute fever. Stools bilious, thin, copious. Substance floating in urine, delirium. 17th day. In pain, no sleep while the fever grew worse. 20th day. Sweated all over, no fever. Stools bilious, aversion to food. Coma, 24th day. Relapse, 34th day. No fever, no constipation. Recovered heat, 40th day, no fever. Bowels constipated for a short time. Aversion to food. Became slightly feverish again. Throughout irregularly, the fever being sometimes absent, sometimes present. For if the fever intermitted and was a relapse soon afterwards, he took little bits of food and that of an unsuitable sort. Sleep bad, delirium at the relapses. Urine at these times had consistency, but was troubled and bad. Bowels constipated, but afterwards relaxed. Continuous slight fevers. Stools thin and copious. 120th day, death. In this case, the bowels continuously from the first day loose with bilious, loose, copious stools, or constipated with hot, undigested stools. Urine throughout bad, mostly comatose. Painful sleeplessness, continued aversion to food. Cast 2 in Thasos, the woman who lay sick by the cold water on the 3rd day after giving birth to a daughter without lochial discharge, was seized with acute fever accompanied by shivering. For a long time before her delivery, she had suffered from fever, being confined to bed and averse to food. After the rigor that took place, the fevers were continuous, acute, and attended with shivering. 8th and following days. Much delirium quickly followed by recovery of reason. Bowels disturbed with copious, thin, watery, and bilious stools. No thirst. 11th day. Was rational, but comatose, urine copious, thin and black. No sleep, 20th day. Slight chills, but heat quickly recovered. Slight wandering, no sleep. Bowels the same. Urine watery and copious, 27th day, no fever. Bowels constipated. Not long afterwards, severe pain in the right hip for a long time. Fevers again attended, urine watery. 40th day, pain in the hip relieved. Continuous coughing with watery, copious sputa. Bowels constipated. Aversion to food. Urine the same. The fevers, without entirely intermitting, were exacerbated irregularly, sometimes increasing and sometimes not doing so. 60th day, the coughing ceased without any critical sign. There was no coction of the sputa, nor any of the usual obsessions. Jaw on the right side convulsed, comatose, wandering, but reason quickly recovered, desperately averse to food. Jaw relaxed past small bilious stools. Fever grew more acute with shivering. On the succeeding days she lost power of speech, but would afterwards converse. 80th day. Death. The urine of this patient was throughout black, thin, and watery. Coma was present, aversion to food, despondency, sleeplessness, irritability, restlessness, the mind being affected by melancholy. Case 3 in Thasos Pythion, who lay sick above the shrine of Heracles after labor, fatigue, and careless living, was seized by violent rigor and acute fever. Tongue dry, thirst bilious, no sleep, urine rather black, with a substance suspended in it, which formed no sediment. Second day, about midday, chill in the extremities, especially in the hands and head. Could not speak or utter a sound. Respiration short for a long time. Recovered warmth. Thirst, a quiet night, slight sweats about the head. Third day. A quiet day, but later, about sunset, grew rather chilly. Nausea, distress, painful night without sleep. Small solid stools were passed. Fourth day, early morning peaceful, but about midday all symptoms were exacerbated. Chill, speechless and voiceless, grew worse, recovered warmth after a time. Black urine with a substance holding in it. Night peaceful, slept. Fifth day. Seemed to be relieved, but there was heaviness in the bowels with pain. Thirst, painful night. Sixth day, early morning peaceful. Towards evening the pains were greater, exacerbation. But later a little clister caused a good movement of the bowels. Slept at night. Seventh day, nausea, rather uneasy. Urine oily. Much distress at night, wandering. No sleep at all. Eighth day, early in the morning, snatches of sleep. But quickly there was chill, loss of speech, respiration thin and weak. In the evening he recovered warmth again, was delirious, towards morning slightly better, stools uncompounded, small bilious. Ninth day comatose, nausea whenever he woke up, not over thirsty. About sunset was uncomfortable, wandered. A bad night. 10th day in the early morning was speechless, great chill, acute fever, much sweat, death. In this case, the pains on even days. Case R4 to that patient suffering from phrenitis on the first day that he took to bed. Vomited copiously, thin vomits of the color of verdigris. Much fever with shivering, continuous sweating all over it. Painful heaviness of head and neck, urine thin with small scattered substances floating in it which did not settle. Copious excreta at a single evacuation. Delirium, no sleep. Second day. In the early morning, speechless, acute fever, sweating, no intermission, throbbing all over the body, convulsions at night. Third day, general exacerbation. Fourth day, death. Case V in Larissa, a bald man suddenly experienced pain in the right thigh. No remedy did any good. First day, acute fever of the ardent type. The patient was quiet, but the pains persisted. Second day. The pains in the thigh subsided, but the fever grew worse. The patient was rather uncomfortable and did not sleep. Extremities cold. Copious and unfavorable urine was passed. Third day. The pain in the thigh ceased, but there was derangement of the intellect, with distress plus and much tossing. Fourth day. Death about midday. Case Vixed in Abdera Pericles was seized with acute fever, continuous and painful, much thirst, nausea, could not retain what he drank. There was slight enlargement of the spleen and heaviness in the head. First day. Epistaxis from the left nostril. The fever, however, increased greatly. Copious urine, turbid and white. On standing, it did not settle. Second day, general exacerbation. The urine, however, had consistency, but there was some sediment. The nausea was relieved and the patient slept. Third day. The fever went down, abundance of urine with concocted and copious sediment. A quiet night. Fourth day, about midday, a hot, violent sweating all over. No fever. Crisis. No relapse. Case 7 in Abdera, the maiden who lay sick by the sacred way, was seized with a fever of the ardent type. She was thirsty and sleepless. Menstruation occurred for the first time. Sixth day, much nausea, redness, shivering, restlessness. Seventh day, same symptoms. Urine thin but of good color. No trouble in the bowels. Eighth day, deafness, acute fever, sleeplessness, nausea, shivering, was rational. Urine similar. Ninth day, same symptoms, and also on the following days. The deafness persisted. 14th day, reason disturbed. The fever subsided. Copious epistaxis. The deafness improved a little. On the following days, nausea and deafness, while there was also delirium. 20th day, pain in the feet, deafness, the delirium ceased. Slight epistaxis, sweating, no fever. 24th day. The fever returned with the deafness. Pain in the feet persisted, delirium. 27th day. Copious sweating. No fever, the deafness ceased. The pain in the feet remained, but in other respects there was a perfect crisis. Casra in Abdera, an Action who lay sick by the Thracian gate, was seized with acute fever, continuous pain in the right side, a dry cough with no sputa on the first days, thirst, sleeplessness, urine of good color, copious and thin. Delirium, warm applications gave no relief. 7th day, in pain, for the fever grew worse, and the pains were not relieved, while the coughing was troublesome and there was difficulty in breathing. 8th day, I bled him in the arm. There was an abundant, proper flow of blood. The pains were relieved, although the dry coughing persisted. 11th day, the fever went down. Slight sweating about the head, the coughing and the sputum more moist. 17th day, began to expectorate small, concocted sputa, was relieved. 20th day, sweated and was free from fever. After a crisis was thirsty and the cleansings from the lungs were not favorable. 27th day. The fever returned, coughing with copious concocted sputa, copious white sediment in urine. Thirst and difficulty in breathing disappeared. 34th day. Sweated all over, no fever. General crisis. Case in Abdera, Herapethus had pain in the head without taking to bed, but shortly afterwards was compelled to do so. He lived close to the upper road. An acute ardent fever seized him. Vomited at the beginning copious bilious matters, thirst, great discomfort, urine thin and black, sometimes with, sometimes without, substances suspended in it. Painful night with fever rising now in this way, now in that, but for the most part irregularly. About the 14th day, deafness, the fever grew worse, urine the same. 20th day, much delirium also on the following days. 40th day, copious epistaxis, more rational, some deafness, but less than before. The fever went down, frequent, but slight. Epistaxis on the following days. About the 60th day, the bleedings from the nose ceased, but there was violent pain in the right hip, and the fever increased. Not long afterwards, pains in all the lower parts. Happened that either the fever was higher and the deafness great, or else, though these symptoms were relieved and less severe, yet the pains in the lower parts about the hips grew worse. But from about the 80th day, all the symptoms were relieved without any disappearing. The urine that was passed was of good color and had greater deposits, while the delirious mutterings were less. About the 100th day, the bowels were disordered with copious bilious stools, and copious evacuations of this nature were passed for a long time. Then followed painful symptoms of dysentery, with relief of the other symptoms. In brief, the fever disappeared and the deafness ceased. 120th day. Complete crisis. Caius X in Abdera Nicodemus, after venery and drunkenness, was seized with fever. At the beginning he had nausea and cardialgia, thirst, tongue parched, urine thin and black. 2nd day. The fever increased, shivering, nausea, no sleep. Bilious yellow vomits, urine the same. A quiet night, sleep. 3rd day. All symptoms less severe, relief. But about sunset he was again somewhat uncomfortable. Painful night. 4th day. Rigor, much fever, pains everywhere. Urine thin with floating substance in it. The night, on the other hand, was quiet. 5th day. All symptoms present but relieved. 6th day. Same pains everywhere. Substance floating in urine, much delirium. 7th day. Relief. 8th day. The other symptoms less severe. 10th day and following days. The pains were present, but all less severe. The exacerbations and the pains in the case of this patient tended throughout to occur on the even days. 20th day. Urine white, having consistency. No sediment on standing. Copious sweating. Seemed to lose his fever, but towards evening grew hot again, with pains in the same parts. Shivering, thirst, slight delirium. 24th day. Much white urine with much sediment. Hot, sweating all over. The fever passed away in a crisis. Believe that after has fallen out a phrase containing the symptoms which were not relieved. Case Tassos, a woman of gloomy temperament, after a grief with a reason for it, without taking to bed, lost sleep and appetite, and suffered thirst and nausea. She lived near the place of Pylades on the plain. 1st day. As night began, there were fears, much rambling, depression, and slight feverishness. Early in the morning, frequent convulsions. Whenever these frequent convulsions intermitted, she wandered and uttered obscenities. Many pains, severe and continuous. 2nd day. Same symptoms, no sleep. Fever more acute. 3rd day. The convulsions ceased. but were succeeded by coma and oppression, followed in turn by wakefulness. She would jump up, could not restrain herself, wandered a great deal. Fever acute, on this night a copious, hot sweating all over. No fever, slept, was perfectly rational, and had a crisis. About the third day, urine black and thin, with particles mostly round floating in it, which did not settle. Near the crisis, copious menstruation. Case 12 in Larissa, a maiden was seized with an acute fever of the ardent type. Sleeplessness, thirst, tongue sooty and parched, urine of good color, but thin. Second day, in pain, no sleep. Third day, copious stools, watery and of a yellowish green. Similar stools on the following days, passed without distress. Fourth day, scanty, thin urine, with a substance suspended in it which did not settle. Delirium at night. Violent and abundant epistaxis. After a shivering fit followed a hot, copious sweating all over. No fever. Acrisis. In the fever and after the crisis, menstruation for the first time, for she was a young maiden. Throughout she suffered nausea and shivering, redness of the face, pain in the eyes, heaviness in the head. In this case there was no relapse but a definite crisis, the pains on the even days. Case 13. Apollonius in Abdera was ailing for a long time without being confined to bed. He had a swollen abdomen and a continual pain in the region of the liver had been present for a long time. Moreover, he became during this period jaundiced and flatulent. His complexion was whitish. After dining and drinking unseasonably cow's milk, plus he at first grew rather hot, he took to his bed, having drunk copiously of milk, boiled and raw, both goats and sheep's, and adopting a thoroughly bad regimen, he suffered much therefrom, for there were exacerbations of the fever. The bowels passed practically nothing of the food taken. The urine was thin and scanty, no sleep. Grievous distension, much thirst, painful swelling of the right hypochondrium, extremities all round rather cold, slight delirious mutterings, forgetfulness of everything he said. He was not himself. About the 14th day from his taking to bed after a rigor, he grew hot, wildly delirious, shouting, distress, much rambling, followed by calm. The coma came on at this time. Afterwards, the bowels were disordered with copious stools, bilious, uncompounded and crude, urine black, scanty and thin, great discomfort. The evacuations showed varying symptoms. They were either black, scanty, and verdigris colored, or else greasy, crude, and smarting. At times they seemed actually to be like milk. About the 24th day, comfortable, in other respects the same, but he had lucid intervals. He remembered nothing since he took to bed, but he quickly was again delirious, and all symptoms took a sharp turn for the worse. About the 30th day, acute fever, copious, thin stools, wandering, cold extremities, speechlessness. 34th day, death. This patient throughout, from the time I had knowledge of the case, suffered from disordered bowels, and thin and black coma, sleeplessness, extremities cold, delirious throughout. Cast in Cyzicus, a woman gave birth, with difficult labor, to twin daughters, and the lochial discharge was far from good. First day. Acute fever with shivering, painful heaviness of head and neck. Sleepless from the first, but silent, sulky, and refractory. Urine thin and of no color. Thirsty, nausea generally. Bowels irregularly disturbed with constipation following. 6th day. Much wandering at night, no sleep. About the 11th day, she went out of her mind and then was rational again. Urine black, thin, and then, after an interval, oily, copious, thin, disordered stools. 14th day. Many convulsions, extremities cold. No further recovery of reason, urine suppressed. 16th day. Speechless. 17th day. Death. Case Cambiantazos, the wife of Delirces, who lay sick on the plain, was seized after a grief with an acute fever, was shivering. From the beginning she would wrap herself up, and throughout, without speaking a word, she would fumble, pluck, scratch, pick hairs, weep, and then laugh. But she did not sleep. Though stimulated, the bowels passed nothing. She drank a little when the attendant suggested it. Urine thin and scanty, fever slight to the touch, coldness of the extremities. 9th day. Much wandering followed by return of reason, silent. 14th day. Respiration rare and large with long intervals to becoming afterwards short, 17th day. Bowels under a stimulus past disordered matters. Then her very drink passed unchanged, nothing coagulated. The patient noticed nothing. The skin tense and dry, 20th day. Much rambling followed by recovery of reason. Speechless, respiration short, 21st day. Death. The respiration of this patient throughout was a mamiana 3-on exatis. Uguli adios, where that's ran, where any ran, rare and large. Took no notice of anything. She constantly wrapped herself up, either much rambling or silence throughout. Case 16 in Meliboa, a youth took to his bed after being for a long time heated by drunkenness and sexual indulgence. He had shivering fits, nausea, sleeplessness, but no thirst. First day. Copious, solid stools passed in abundance of fluid, and the following days the excreta were copious, watery, and of a greenish yellow. Urine thin, scanty, and of no color. Respiration rare and large with long intervals. Tension, soft underneath, of the hypochondrium. Extending out to either side, continual throbbing throughout of the epigastrium, urine oily, 10th day. Delirious, but quiet, for he was orderly and silent. Hash skin dry and tense. Stools either copious and thin or bilious and greasy. In the last, I conclude that this medical history was hastily revised. A slight revision could easily have cleared away the inconsistencies, which are, as Galen seems to have seen, more apparent than real. Chapter 14. The oath I swear by Apollo physician, by Asclepius, by health, by Panacea, and by all the gods and goddesses, making them my witnesses, that I will carry out, according to my ability, and judgment, this oath and this indenture. Behold, my teacher in this art equal to my own parents, to make him partaker in my livelihood, when he is in need of money to share mine with him, to consider his family as my own brothers, and to teach them this art, if they want to learn it, without fee or indenture, to impart precept, oral instruction, and all other instruction, to my own sons, the sons of my teacher, and to indentured pupils who have taken the physician's oath, but to nobody else. I will use treatment to help the sick according to my ability and judgment, but never with a view to injury and wrongdoing. Neither will I administer a poison to anybody when asked to do so, nor will I suggest such a course. Similarly, I will not give to a woman a pessary to cause abortion, but I will keep pure and holy both my life and my art. I will not use the knife, not even verily on sufferers from stone, but I will give place to such as are craftsmen therein. Into whatsoever houses I enter, I will enter to help the sick, and I will abstain from all intentional wrongdoing and harm, especially from abusing the bodies of man or woman, bond or free. And whatsoever I shall see or hear in the course of my profession, as well as outside my profession in my intercourse with men, if it be what should not be published abroad, I will never divulge, holding such things to be holy secrets. Now if I carry out this oath, and break it not, may I gain forever reputation among all men for my life and for my art. But if I transgress it, and forswear myself, may the opposite befall. Chapter 5. Precepts I. Time is that wherein there is opportunity, and opportunity is that wherein there is no great time. Healing is a matter of time, but it is sometimes also a matter of opportunity. However, knowing this, one must attend in medical practice not primarily to plausible theories, but to experience combined with reason. For a theory is a composite memory of things apprehended with sense perception. For the sense perception coming first in experience and conveying to the intellect the thing subjected to it is clearly imaged, and the intellect, receiving these things many times, noting the occasion, the time, and the manner, stores them up in itself and remembers. Now I approve of theorizing also if it lays its foundation in incident, and deduces its conclusions in accordance with phenomena. For if theorizing lays its foundation in clear fact, it is found to exist in the domain of intellect, which itself receives from other sources each of its impressions. So we must conceive of our nature as being stirred and instructed under compulsion by the great variety of things, and the intellect as precepts begins not from a clear impression, but from a plausible fiction, it often induces a grievous and troublesome condition. All who so act are lost in a blind alley. Now no harm would be done if bad practitioners received their due wages. But as it is their innocent patients suffer, for whom the violence of their disorder did not appear sufficient without the addition of their fees, issues, and experience. I must now pass on to another subject, to thought. But conclusions which are merely verbal cannot bear fruit. Only those do which are based on demonstrated fact. For affirmation and talk are deceptive and treacherous. Wherefore one must hold fast to facts in generalizations also, and occupy oneself with facts persistently, if one is to acquire that ready and infallible habit which we call the art of medicine. For so to do will bestow a very great advantage upon sick folk and medical practitioners. Do not hesitate to inquire of laymen, if thereby there seems likely to result any improvement in treatment. For so I think the whole art has been set forth by observing some part of the final end in each of many particulars, and then combining all into a single whole. So one must pay attention to generalities and incidents with help and quietness rather than with professions, and the excuses that accompany ill success. Early determination of the patient's treatment, since only what has actually been administered will benefit. Emphatic assertion is of no use is beneficial but complicated. For it is through many turns and changes that all diseases settle into some sort of permanence. This piece of advice also will need our consideration, as it contributes somewhat to the whole. For should you begin by discussing fees, you will suggest to the patient either that you will go away and leave him if no agreement be reached, or that you will neglect him and not prescribe any immediate treatment. So one must not be anxious about fixing a fee, for I consider such a worry to be harmful to a troubled patient, particularly if the disease be acute. For the quickness of the disease, offering no opportunity for turning back, spurs on the good physician not to seek his profit, but rather to lay hold on reputation. Therefore, it is better to reproach a patient you have saved than to extort money from those who are at death's door. And yet some patients ask for what is out of the way, and doubtful, through prejudice, deserving indeed to be disregarded, but not to be punished. Wherefore you must reasonably oppose them, as they are embarked upon a stormy sea of change. For in heaven's name, who that is a brotherly physician, practices with such hardness of heart, as not at the beginning to conduct a preliminary examination of every illness, and prescribe what will help towards a cure, to heal the patient, and not to overlook the reward, to say nothing of the desire that makes a man ready to learn. I urge you not to be too unkind, but to consider carefully your patient's superabundance or means. Sometimes give your services for nothing, calling to mind a previous benefaction or present satisfaction. And if there be an opportunity of serving one who is a stranger in financial straits, give full assistance to all such. For where there is love of man, there is also love of God. For some patients, though conscious that their condition is perilous, recover their health simply through their contentment with the goodness of the physician. And it is well to superintend the sick to make them well, to care for the healthy to keep them well, but also to care for one's own self, so as to observe what is seemly the 7 and 5. Now those who are buried in deep ignorance of the art cannot appreciate what has been said. In fact, such men will be shown up as ignorant of medicine, suddenly exalted, yet needing good luck. For should wealthy men gain some remission of their trouble, these quacks win reputation through a double good fortune. And if a relapse occurs, they stand upon their dignity, having neglected the irreproachable methods of the art, wherewith a good physician, a brother of the art as he is called, would be at his best. But he who accomplishes his cures easily without making a mistake would transgress none of these methods through want of power. For he is not distrusted on the ground of wickedness, for quacks do not attempt treatment when they see an alarming condition, and avoid calling in other physicians because they wickedly hate help. And the patients in their pain drift on a sea of twofold wretchedness, for not having entrusted themselves to the end to the fuller treatment that is given by the art. For a remission of a disease affords a sick man much relief. Wherefore, wanting a healthy condition, they do not wish always to submit to the same treatment, therein being in accord with the physician's versatility. For the patients are in need through heavy expenditure, worshiping incompetence and showing no gratitude when they meet it. When they have the power to be well off, they exhaust themselves about fees, really wishing to be well for the sake of managing their investments or farms, yet without a thought in these matters to receive anything. E8, so much for such recommendations. For remission and aggravation of a disease require respectively less or more medical assistance. A physician does not violate etiquette even if being in difficulties on occasion over a patient and in the dark through inexperience. He should urge the calling in of others in order to learn by consultation the truth about the case, and in order that there may be fellow workers to afford abundant help. For when a diseased condition is stubborn and the evil grows, in the perplexity of the moment most things go wrong. So, on such occasions one must be bold, for never will I lay it down that the art has been condemned in this matter. Key physicians who meet in consultation must never quarrel or jeer at one another. For I will assert upon oath, a physician's reasoning should never be jealous of another. To be so will be a sign of weakness. Those who act thus lightly are rather those connected with the business of the marketplace. Yet it is no mistaken idea to call in a consultant, for in all abundance there is lack. With all these things it will appear strong evidence for the reality of the art if a physician, while skillfully treating the patient, does not refrain from exhortations not to worry in mind, in the eagerness to reach the hour of recovery. For we physicians take the lead in what is necessary for health, and if he be under orders, the patient will not go far astray. For left to themselves, patients sink through their painful condition, give up the struggle, and depart this life. But he who has taken the sick man in hand, if he display the discoveries of the art, preserving nature, not trying to alter it, will sweep away the present depression or the distrust of the moment. For the healthy condition of a human being is a nature that has naturally attained a movement, not alien, but perfectly adapted, having produced it by means of breath, warmth, and concoction of humors in every way, by complete regimen and by everything combined, unless there be some congenital or early deficiency. Should there be such a thing in a patient who is wasting, try to assimilate to the fundamental nature T for the wasting, even of long standing, is unnatural. You must also avoid adopting, in order to gain a patient, luxurious headgear and elaborate perfume. For excess of strangeness will win you ill repute, but a little will be considered in good taste, just as pain in one part is a trifle, while in every part it is serious. Yet I do not forbid your trying to please, for it is not unworthy of a physician's dignity. Should we bear in mind the employment of instruments and the pointing out of significant symptoms, and so forth. And if for the sake of a crowded audience you do wish to hold a lecture, your ambition is no laudable one, and at least avoid all citations from the poets, for to quote them argues feeble industry. For I forbid in medical practice an industry not pertinent to the art, and laboriously far-fetched, and which therefore has in itself alone an attractive grace, for you will achieve the empty toil of a drone and a drone's spoils. 13. A condition, too, is desirable free from the late learner's faults, for his state accomplishes nothing that is immediate, and its remembrance of what is not before the eyes is but tolerable. So there arises a quarrelsome inefficiency, with headstrong outrage that has no thought for what is seemly, while definitions, professions, oaths, great as far as the gods invoked are concerned, come from the physician in charge of the disease. Bewildered laymen being lost in admiration of flowery language, spoken in continuous reading and each instruction, crowding together even before they are troubled by a disease. Wherever I may be in charge of a case, with no confidence should I call in such men to help as consultants, for in them comprehension of seemly learning is far to seek. Seeing then that they cannot but be unintelligent, I urge that experience is useful, the learning of opinions coming far after. For who is desirous and ambitious of learning truly subtle diversities of opinion to the neglect of calm and practiced skill? Wherefore, I advise you to listen to their words, but to oppose their acts. When regimen has been restricted, you must not suppress for long a long-standing desire of the patient. 1a. In a chronic disease indulgence, 2 helps to set a man on his feet again, if one pay the necessary attention to one who is blind. As great fear is to be guarded against, so is excessive joy. A sudden disturbance of the air is also to be guarded against. The prime of life has everything lovely, the decline has the opposite. Incoherence of speech comes from an affection, or from the ears, or from the speaker's talking of something fresh before he has uttered what was in his mind before, or from his thinking of fresh things before he has expressed what was in his thoughts before. Now this is a thing that happens without any visible affection so called, mostly to those who are in love with their heart. The power of youth, when the matter is trifling, is sometimes supremely great. Irregularity in a disease signifies that it will be a long one. A crisis is the riddance of a disease. A slight cause turns into a cure unless the affection be in a vital part. Because fellow feeling at grief causes distress, some are distressed through the fellow feeling of another. Loud talking is painful. Overwork calls for gentle dissuasion. A wooded district benefits. Chapter 6. Nutriment I, nutriment and form of nutriment, one and many. 1. Inasmuch as its kind is one. Form varies with moistness or dryness. These foods, too, have their forms and quantities. They are for certain things, and for a certain number of things. Tika, it increases, strengthens, clothes with flesh, makes unlike. What is in the several parts according to the nature of each part and its original power. It makes into the likeness of a power, when the nutriment that comes in has the mastery, and when that is mastered, which was there to begin with. It also loses its qualities. Sometimes the earlier nutriment, when in time it has been liberated or added, sometimes the later, when in time it has been liberated or added. Both are weakened in time and after a time by the nutriment from without which has continuously entered in, and for a long time firmly has interwoven itself with all the limbs, 6 die, and it sends forth shoots of its own proper form. It changes the old form and descends. It nourishes as it is digested. Sometimes it alters the earlier form and completely obscures the former ones. 7 power of nutriment reaches to bone and to all the parts of bone, to sinew, to vein, to artery, to muscle, to membrane, to flesh, fat, blood, phlegm, marrow, brain, spinal marrow, the intestines and all their parts. It reaches also to heat, breath, and moisture. Nutriment is that which is nourishing, is that which is about to nourish. The beginning of all things is one, and the end of all things is one, and the end and beginning are the same. X and all the particular details in nourishment are managed, and well or ill, while if, as aforesaid, ill if ordered in the opposite way to these. While in juices varied in colors and in powers, to harm or to help, or neither to harm nor to help, varied in amount, excess or defect in combination of some but not of others, 12 heat. And to the warming of all it harms or helps, to the cooling it harms or helps, to the power it harms or helps, 13 of power, varied natures. Humors, corrupting whole, part, from without, from within, spontaneous, not spontaneous. Spontaneous for us, not spontaneous, but a cause. Part is clear, part is obscure, part is within our power, and part is not. Nature is sufficient in all for all. 16, to deal with nature from without. Plaster, anointing, salve, uncovering of whole or part, covering of whole or part, warming or cooling, similarly, astriction, ulceration, biting, grease, from within. Some of the aforesaid, and in addition, an obscure cause in part or whole, in some cases but not in all. Cecital. Secretions in accordance with nature, by the bowels, urine, sweat, sputum, mucus, womb, through hemorrhoid, wart, leprosy, tumor, carcinoma, from nostrils, lungs, bowels, penis, in accordance with nature, contrary to nature. The peculiar differences in these things depend on differences in the individual, on times, and on methods. All these things are one nature and not one. All these things are many natures and one nature. CO. Purging upward or downward, neither upward nor downward. Ginsengheim, the nutriment, purging bad or excellent, according to circumstances. Ulceration, burn, scab, blood, pus, lymph, leprosy, scurf, dandruff, scurvy, white leprosy, freckles. Not nutriment if it e'en nourish. Not name, 22. It travels from within to hair, nails, and to the extreme surface. From without nutriment travels from the extreme surface to the innermost parts. Conflux one, conspiration one, all things in sympathy, all the parts as forming a whole, and severally the parts in each part with reference to the work. The great beginning travels to the extreme part. From the extreme part there is traveling to the great beginning, one nature to be and not to be. Thereses of diseases depend on nutriment, on breath, on heat, on blood, on phlegm, on bile, on humors, on flesh, on fat, on vein, on artery, on sinew, muscle, membrane, bone, brain, spinal marrow, mouth, tongue, oesophagus, stomach, bowels, midriff, peritoneum, liver, spleen, kidneys, bladder, oops. All these things, both as a whole and severally, their greatness great and not great. 2060 signs, tickling, ache, rupture, mind, sweat, sediment, and urine, rest, tossing, condition of the eyes, imaginations, jaundice, hiccous, epilepsy, blood entire, sleep, from both these and all other things in accordance with nature, and everything else of a similar nature that tends to harm or help. Pains of the whole or of a part, indications of severity, of the one greater severity, of the other less. And from both come signs of greater severity, and from both come signs of less, or staring, are merely stages in the process of perpetual change. Being and not being are one and the same. 27, sweet, not sweet, sweet in power, like water, sweet to the taste, like honey. Signs of either are sores, eyes, and tastings, which can also distinguish degrees. Sweet to sight, in colors and in combinations generally, sweet to a greater or less degree. Porousness of a body for transpiration, healthy for those from whom more is taken. Denseness of body for transpiration, unhealthy for those from whom less is taken. Those who transpire freely are weaker, healthier, and recover easily. Those who transpire hardly are stronger before they are sick, but on falling sick they make difficult recovery. These for both whole and part. The lungs draw a nourishment which is the opposite of that of the body. All other parts draw the same. Terxis, beginning of nutriment of breath, nostrils, mouth, throat, lungs, and the transpiratory system generally. Beginning of nutriment both wet and dry, mouth, oesophagus, stomach. The more ancient navel is throat, sutuum, root of veins, liver, root of arteries, heart. Power one, and not one, by which all these things and those of a different sort are managed. One for the life of whole and part, not one for the sensation of whole and part. 25. Milk nutriment for those to whom milk is a natural nutriment, but for others it is not. For some wine is nutriment, for others not. So with meats and the other many forms of nutriment, the differences being due to place and habit. Nourishment is sometimes into growth and being, sometimes into being only, as is the case with old men. Sometimes in addition is into strength. The condition of the athlete is not natural. A healthy state is superior in all. It is a great thing successfully to adapt quantity to power. 2016 milk and blood are what is left over from nutriment. 37 life. Here is generally harmonized toward the embryo and its nutriment. And again, nutriment tends upwards to milk and the nourishment of the baby. The natures of all are untaught. XL blood of another is useful. One's own blood is useful. Blood of another is harmful. One's own blood is harmful. One's own humors are harmful. Humors of another are beneficial. One's own humors are beneficial. The harmonious is unharmonious. The unharmonious is harmonious. Another's milk is good. One's own milk is bad. Another's milk is harmful. One's own milk is useful. XEI. Food for the young, partly digested. For the old, completely changed. For adults, unchanged. Exhalation for formation, 35 days. For movement, 70 days. For completion, 210 days. Others for form, 45 days. For motion, 90 days. For delivery, 270 days. Others, 50 for form. For the first leap, 100. For completion, 300 days. For distinction of limbs, 40. For shifting, 80. For detachment, 240 days. It is not and is. There are found therein both more and less, in respect of both the whole and the parts. But the more is not much more, and the less not much less. Exitit nutriment of bones after breaking. For the nostril, twice 5, for jaw, collarbone, and ribs. Twice this. For the forearm, thrice. For the leg and upper arm, 4 times. For the thigh, 5 times. There may be, however, in these a little more or less. Live blood is liquid and blood is solid. Liquid blood is good, liquid blood is bad. Solid blood is good, solid blood is bad. All things are good or bad relatively. It's the way up, down, so the power of nutriment superior to mass. Mass of nutriment superior to power, both in moist things and in dry. So the same. It takes away, it adds not the same thing. It takes away from one and adds to another the same thing. So the deep. Pulsations of veins and breathing of the lungs according to age, harmonious and unharmonious, signs of disease and of health more than of disease, and of disease more than of health. For breath too of nutriment. Liquid nutriment more easily changed than solid. Solid nutriment more easily changed than liquid. That which is hardly altered is hard of digestion, and that which is easily added is easy of digestion. And for such as need a quick reinforcement, a liquid remedy is best for recovery of power. For such as need a remedy through smell. For those who need slower reinforcement, solid nutriment. Muscles being more solid waste, less easily than other parts, save bone and sinew. Parts that have been exercised resist change, being according to their kind stronger than they otherwise would have been, and therefore less liable to waste. Pus comes from flesh. Pus, like lymph, comes from blood and moisture generally. Pus is nutriment for a sore. Lymph is nutriment for vein and artery. Marrow, nutriment of bone. And through this a callus forms, lived power gives to all things increase, nourishment, and birth, moisture the vehicle of nutriment.